It is 3 minutes after 10 and the phone lines are open. Remember, the Mayor of London is contractually obliged to answer whatever question you ring in with. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And I can tell you that there are currently a couple of phone lines free, so don't hang about and make sure you grab one if you want one. We can cover anything at all. And before we get into, I think, probably the most obvious issue of the moment, we should probably just catch up on how ULEZ is going, because there was a period during the last few months when it felt like the biggest story in town.
Well, the good news is, good morning, James, and good morning to your listeners. The good news is 1 month on, there was a report prepared by Transport for London, and it's fantastic to see the progress we've made. So when I first announced this policy back in February 2017, 39% of vehicles seen driving on an average day were compliant, so don't pay any ULEZ, which meant actually quite a lot of vehicles were non-compliant, polluting, would have to pay the ULEZ. Last May 2022, that figure had gone up to 85%. And the great news is 1 month on, 95% of vehicles seen driving across London, including outer London, are compliant. They don't pay a penny to drive the vehicle that they drive, but they are seeing the benefits of cleaner air. And there's been a 97% reduction in sort of coverage in the media and on social media.
I saw that. Do you think it's dead as a political issue? Do you think it's an issue in the mayoral election?
Well, I think clean air should be an issue because if you want clean air, you'll support my policies and you'll vote for me. If you want toxic air, you'll vote for the Tory candidate who wants to get rid of all the ULEZs, get rid of all the congestion charges and get rid of all those things which have led to cleaner air in our city.
It is 5 minutes after 10. We turn our attention inevitably to your stance on a ceasefire in Gaza, which is, ostensibly different from Keir Starmer's. The front bench spokespeople who have resigned their positions are closer to your position, clearly, than they are to the Labour leaders. Can you just talk us through precisely what the difference is between calling for humanitarian pauses to be extended upon a road towards a ceasefire and calling for a humanitarian ceasefire?
Well, the first thing, I appreciate how wide your listenership is. I recognise there are people listening to this who will have family members, loved ones who have been killed by Hamas on October the 7th or taken hostage. And I also recognise some of your listeners will have family members, friends or loved ones who have been killed by the Israeli military over the last 5 to 6 weeks, more than 11,000, including more than 4,000 children. I also recognise, by the way, the massive increase in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, which we've got to condemn unequivocally. I think it's possible, James, to, with good faith, disagree on an issue in relation to what should happen in the Middle East. I think it's wrong to subscribe to those who are against a ceasefire a view that they are in favour of or they're condoning the killing of civilians. Similarly, I think it's unfair and wrong to subscribe to those of us calling for a ceasefire that we're somehow Hamas supporters or we are naive. I'm quite clear in relation to the reason why I call for a ceasefire. I think the bloodshed's got to stop. I look at the 120 countries who are supporting a ceasefire, the United Nations supporting a ceasefire, the UN General Secretary calling for a ceasefire, all these humanitarian organisations calling for a ceasefire. But also, I know from my time in government, the difference a British Prime Minister calling for a ceasefire can make. In 2009, Gordon Brown, our Prime Minister, and the opposition called for a ceasefire. And a few days later, Israel, in fact, unilaterally did have a ceasefire, and the Arab League persuaded Hamas to have a ceasefire, which was first for a day, then weeks, then months, then years. The bloodshed has to stop.
I suppose my question looks more at the notion of postponement, and in fact your example of 2009 rather proves the point, because you're both you and Keir Starmer are calling for a postponement of combat, and yet your side of the argument pretends that you're calling for a cessation when you know it will start again. And Israel would argue, and supporters of Israel would argue, that the best way of ensuring that it doesn't start again, or the best way of prolonging the postponement for as long as is possible, is to continue the bombardment.
Well, history tells us continued violence doesn't lead to peace. What we need is, of course, a roadmap to a two-state solution. We've got to get the respective parties speaking, but we've got to get there in the first instance by stopping the killing. I'm afraid there's lots of bad faith now in that part of the world, even worse than there was in the past. But just pause and think in our lifetime, James, we're of a similar age. Just look, I'm not giving equivalence, by the way, to these parts of the world, but it's just a comparison. Just look now at Lebanon or Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and South Africa. At some stage, calm heads recognised the importance of a cessation of violence. Use the word pause. That led ultimately to a permanent ending of violence. But unless you call for a ceasefire, how are you going to get there?
Do you think Keir Starmer's handled this quite well or quite badly?
Well, on a whole host of issues to the Middle East, I agree with Keir in relation to the importance of advocating for a two-state solution, the importance of food getting into the Gaza Strip, medical supplies, water, humanitarian aid. On this one particular issue, we've just got to, disagree in an agreeable fashion.
But do you think he's handled the disagreement well? I mean, from a leader point of view, even though you would rather he agreed with you, has he handled the dissent well?
Well, I think his response to, the vote yesterday was the right one in relation to recognising the differences. He also used the word regret for those colleagues that couldn't vote in the way he wanted to do so. And I think Keir's shown over the last few weeks that he can accommodate differences within the Labour tent.
We'll hit the phones imminently, but Johnny's just reminded me of something that I asked everyone to remind me of. So Johnny goes straight to the top of the class. What happened to that thing about getting Oyster cards, the kids' Oyster cards onto their phones? You forgot about it, didn't you?
I've not forgotten about it. I've not got the answer now. I haven't. Because
this was months ago. I forgot about it.
It came from the brains in the O'Brien family. That's why I know it's a good idea. And
exactly.
So I'll come back to you shortly.
Not good enough, Mayor Khan. Not good enough. Thank you, Johnny. Feet to the fire next time you're here. Right.
Johnny, a.k.a. James's daughter.
It's not. It's here. It says Johnny. Shall we go to the phone?
The first caller, good morning, is from Ealing in West London, and it's Finlay. Hi, Finlay.
Good morning, James and Sadiq. How are you doing?
Not bad.
Good, mate. Thanks.
My question is as follows. The Conservative candidate for Mayor, Susan Hall, liked tweets praising Enoch Powell's racist quotes, as well as some containing Islamophobic abuse. Language matters, particularly at a time when community tensions are so high. Do you think it's acceptable for politicians to promote offensive and divisive views such as this?
That's a bit of a gimme, that, isn't it? And also a slightly rhetorical question. So briefly, if you would.
Well, Philly, I think there's the short point and there's a bigger point. The short point is, of course, I think somebody who likes Powell and supports Trump doesn't deserve to be the mayor of London. But there's a bigger point, and it goes to something we've seen last weekend and the week before that I spoke about publicly, which is, I think, one of the jobs of politicians, whether you're the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, the Mayor of London, or a would-be Mayor of London, is not to play on people's fears, but to address them at these times in particular, to bring people together and to unite communities. And I think what you've illustrated in the examples you've given, and there are many others in relation to the Tory candidate aspiring to be the Mayor of London, is in a diverse city like London, where you and I both know there can be times of the year, the times of a 4-year cycle, which there can be passions running high. You've got to be bringing people together rather than dividing communities. And I think that's why it's incredibly important. We know the history of the last 2 mayoral elections. I'm hoping this one will be different. Let's wait and see. But I think, she's shown she's not fit to be the mayor of this great city.
I'm no surprises there. I would add that her defence of the tweets to which Finlay refers was that she didn't remember doing them and that she didn't intend to cause offence with a string of tweets that included amplifying a well-known far-right provocateur who was abusing you and apparently liking a sort of encomium to Enoch Powell. Let's crack on. Thank you, Finlay.
Thanks, Finlay. The next caller is from North London, Islington, and it's Abdi. Good morning, Abdi.
Good morning. Good morning, James. Good morning, Mayor Khan.
Good morning.
Witnessing the conflict in the Middle East has been horrifying, especially the disproportionate response by Israel. First of all, I'd like to commend you, and you deserve full credit for being one of the first UK leaders to call for a ceasefire. My question, however, and concern is around the rising community tensions here in London. How are you making sure that the conflict in the Middle East isn't played out in the streets and schools of our great city?
Abdi, thanks for your question, and thanks for the way you asked it as well. Look, Abdi, you and I, and all the listeners here who aren't Jewish, need to understand there are Jewish Londoners who are scared. We've got to recognise that. Every Jewish person I've spoken to, met with, engaged with, is affected by what happened on October the 7th and subsequently. And by the way, we've also got to recognise there are many Muslims across our city and country who are scared. We've seen a massive increase in anti-Semitism and an increase in Islamophobia as well. And what I've sought to do, Abdi, not just over the last 5-6 weeks, but during my mayoralty, is to work with London's diverse communities, particularly young Londoners, to give them the skills, the tools, the resilience, so they don't look for things that are different straight away, but look for things that we have in common. Also dealing with some of the stereotypes that exist, the tropes that exist about Jewish people and Muslim people as well. Tensions are running high, Abdi. There has been this massive increase I talk about. And one of the things I want listeners to do is just to be cognizant about how their behaviour is received by the other. So, for example, yes, strictly speaking, a particular chant may not be a criminal offence. Yes, strictly speaking, your behaviour may not be a criminal offence. But how it's received is petrifying to the recipient. And so it's really important that we recognise that one of the joys of living in London is our diversity, but we should be sensitive to how others are feeling. And I mentioned in answer to James's question at the top of the show, Abdi, I've met Londoners whose family, friends or loved ones were killed on October the 7th. I've met Londoners whose family, friends or loved ones have been killed by the Israeli military. And so it is tough, Abdi. I think we're going to get through this. The last thing I'll say, Abdi, is this. I think we should be able to disagree agreeably, even on really emotive, passionate issues like this. And I worry some of the things people are saying and doing may make it really difficult once the tensions have ended for us to carry on being good neighbours and good friends and good colleagues.
How worried were you on Saturday about serious violence? How worried were the Met?
So incredibly worried. So you'll remember, because it was played out in the media, what the Home Secretary said. And I was concerned that some of the language she was using would embolden the far right to turn up on Saturday to, inverted commas, protect the cenotaph. No risk, by the way, of the organisers and the pro-Palestinians going anywhere near the cenotaph because they'd agreed with the Met Police Service to stay well aware. I was in regular contact with the Commissioner and his top team during the Friday, Saturday and Sunday. You know, James, 18 officers were injured, 3 of them hospitalised, 3 hospitalised, and it was thuggery from the far right. Their leader comes along after promoting himself on social media, incites his followers, then jumps back in a cab and drives off. Typical cowardice leadership from far-right leaders. But we were worried. But also, James, during the course of that day, I'm not sure if your listeners realise, a lot of the members of the far-right then sought to go to where the pro-Palestinian march was taking place to cause violence there as well. And so there were incidents on Saturday of hatred being spread, both Semitic hatred, but also Islamophobic hatred. That's why Abdi's question is so important, because we can't allow this small number of people inciting hatred to divide our communities. And I'm afraid, the Home Secretary that was, emboldened and encouraged that sort of behaviour.
Are you saying that you believe that the Home Secretary effectively summoned the far-right thugs?
Well, there was no talk before the intervention of the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister of Remembrance Day, Armistice, the Remembrance Sunday or Armistice Day being affected. None of the organisers of the pro-Palestinian march, there were a number of organisers, a number of groups, had agreed with the Met Police Service to stay well away from the cenotaph, well away from Parliament Square, because they were aware, Armistice Day. And so it was never an issue in relation to jeopardising Armistice Day or Remembrance
But she
Sunday
very much created the idea that it was.
Exactly right. And that then what happens then is, social media amplifies these things. Park for a second the deep fake stuff in relation to, my intervention and my involvement in relation to this.
Just tell people what you're talking about, because not everyone will be aware of that.
So we it was brought to our attention that there was stuff circulating on social media amplified by the far right where I'm allegedly, I can say it's me, where I'm saying to a group of people that I'm telling the Commissioner what to do and so forth and so forth. And that led to, obviously, a lot of anger. Those
it was
people
completely manufactured. It was completely fake
yeah.
footage, but it looked quite convincing.
Yeah.
That's quite scary, isn't it, moving forward?
Well, the serious point in relation to the future is that the technology now with artificial intelligence and the speed with which these algorithms work is, you can imagine during the course of a close general election or the hours before a quite emotive march, how you can incite hatred and sow division and mislead people. This disinformation is really serious.
Final question about this. I read reports the police felt that the attacks upon them had been caused by the comments of the former Home Secretary. Is that something you'd agree with?
Well, I think police officers and former police officers have spoken publicly about this over the weekend, and you're echoing what they've said. That's how they feel. That's how they feel. There are a number of joys of our democracy, James. We talk when we talk later on about separation of powers. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. There's also one of the joys of our democracy. The executive, people like me, the Home Secretary, can't tell the police what to do. All right, because just imagine where it would end. They could today tell the police what protests to allow. Tomorrow they tell the police who to investigate. The day after who to charge. And that's why it's incredibly important to keep them separate. And there is a concern that some of the language used by the Home Secretary and, by the way, Prime Minister, gave the impression that the police were being political. They were, inverted commas, choosing sides. And if you're on the other side, you can understand why there might be animus towards the police. And the police have to police without fear or favour. We can't ask the police their views on Remain or Brexit or, the Middle East or COVID rules. Their job is not to ask, those sorts of questions, but to implement and enforce the law.
Another call, please. Thank you, Abdi.
Thanks, Abdi. Thanks for your question. The next caller is from Brentford. Richard. Good morning, Richard.
Oh, good morning, Mayor, and good morning, James. Can I say I'm really grateful for the calm way you're dealing with this, because whenever I hear people commenting on this, that emotions get really high, and I'm really trying to understand what's behind the call for the ceasefire, because I put two questions to you, I think. We're not dealing with rational people on one side, are we? We're not dealing with people who are afraid of dying. They're not. It's not like two equal parties willing to submit themselves to logic and reason. They could have freed the hostages. No hostages, as well, not very many, have been released so far. They could have done that, despite the onslaught. And they are committed, aren't they, Hamas, to ridding the world of Israelis. So when I think people use the term naive, it's pejorative, it sounds rude, but I think what they're trying to say to people on the other side of the debate is it's a hope. We all want to stop the bloodshed. We'd all love it to stop. But saying have a ceasefire, it will change nothing. What will change Hamas and what will stop future bloodshed if there is a ceasefire? Give me those arguments, and then I'll begin to see the other side, I think.
It's a great question.
Well, Richard, thank you very much, not just for the great question, but the way you've asked it. And I'm hoping that you and I can demonstrate over the course of the next few minutes how we can disagree agreeably and be respectful with each other. So look, let me deal with your core points. I think you're spot on. Hamas is a terrorist organisation. Israel is a state. So we've got to be a bit careful in relation to equivalence. But the consequences of the actions of the Israeli military and of Hamas are similar in the sense of the bloodshed and the killing. So it is a fact that more than 1,200 innocent Israelis were killed by Hamas, a terrorist atrocity. It is also a fact that more than 200 Israelis have been taken hostage by Hamas and yet are yet to be released, and they must be released. It is similarly a fact that the Israeli military is responsible for the deaths of more than 11,000 Palestinians. The vast, vast majority, I'm sure we both agree, innocent, men, women, more than 4,000 children. Now, what we can do is say we support what Israel wants to do in relation to self-defense, but actually the concept of self-defense is one that's got to be proportionate. The best analogy is if you throw a punch at me, I can't shoot you with a machine gun. The response has got to be proportionate when it comes to self-defense. International law says that, as well as domestic law as well. So, of course, Israel's got a right to defend herself. There should be a targeted action to get those hostages released. But unless there's you can call it a cessation of violence, you can call it a ceasefire. Unless there's a call for that, how can you ever get that? And I use the example deliberately, Richard, when it came to James and I's intervention before in 2009. And the reason why 2009 is relevant is not just did Gordon Brown call for a ceasefire, and by the way, so did the Shadow Foreign Secretary, William Hague. Gordon Brown then worked his socks off to get that ceasefire, first going to the United Nations. The US government weren't pleased, they abstained on the vote, and then persuading the Israeli Prime Minister, who, by the way, Richard, had a unilateral ceasefire, which led to Hamas also having a ceasefire because the Arab League got involved. But here's the point, Richard. How can you have an objective where you want to kill off Hamas when the way you're conducting yourself is leading to a conveyor belt of new people wanting to join an organization? Call it Hamas, call it something else, where the ideology is to fight thy neighbor who is Israeli. And that's what we've got to address. We've got to stop the conveyor belt of people being radicalized to hate Israel. And by the way, can I say this, Richard? It's really important I say this as the mayor of London. I think it's offensive to assume every Jewish person endorses completely the policies of Netanyahu. Just like it's offensive to assume, and by the way, you're not doing this anyway, I'm just saying, opportunity for me to say this, that every Muslim person endorses the policies of Hamas. And I think it's really important for us to be able to talk like this and explain the pros and cons of a cessation of violence, a ceasefire. But Richard, unless you call for something, there's no chance in hell of it happening. And the best way for us to be a dear ally of Israel, to be a friend of Israel, to say, listen, what you're doing is not leading to people supporting your cause and your struggle, but it's driving the public opinion away.
So what you're saying essentially is that and everyone could agree that the goal would be a complete end of attacks in either direction, and you're saying, I think, that can't be achieved by attacks. That can only be achieved by negotiation, by talk. And what Richard is saying, and there's always plenty of evidence to support this position, is that Hamas are quite explicit about their commitment to the destruction of Israel. So there is grave doubt surrounding the notion that from that perspective, proper peace is ever achievable.
Sure. Well, Richard, here's the point. So let's not assume that Hamas will always be the representatives of the Palestinian people. We know in the West Bank, it's Fatah, and so that's the first point. But secondly, are you more likely or less likely to get people withdrawing from Hamas and supporting Fatah if you're seeing a disproportionate use of force in the Gaza Strip? And so I think we do need to show allyship to Israel. Of course we do. We've also got to be saying to Israel, listen, your end game, the destruction of Hamas, is that possible when they could reinvent themselves with a different name, with the same ideology? And that's why at some stage, there's got to be some, talking and a resolution. And if the Prime Minister of the UK, he's crossing his arms saying, well, we can't do anything because the US hasn't asked for this, that means, frankly speaking, we've not got an autonomous foreign policy. We've not got our own foreign policy. We'll do whatever the US president does. Gordon Brown, 2009, is an example where we showed we've got an independent foreign policy and we took leadership.
Richard, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I've listened very carefully and I really accept and understand and appreciate the empathy and the wish. But I just think everything you say and everything people say who want to negotiate is ignoring the past, is ignoring the behaviour of these people in the past, ignoring the fact that they don't care about dying. They are not people like you and I. They're not capable. You and I can have a discussion, I think. I don't think they can.
Well, you're talking about Hamas now, of course.
Yeah.
Richard, let me deal with that head on. So look, the reason why in the past the cessation of violence, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, has not been permanent is because there's not been the two-state solution that we need to have. That's the first point. The second point, and I say this in a respectful way, so please don't think I'm being patronising. If you follow the logic of what you're saying through, it will mean all of the 2.2 million people in the Gaza Strip, 2.2 million people, either being killed or sent to the Sinai Desert in Egypt. So you've got displacement happening yet again of the Palestinian people. That's the only way, if you follow the logic of what you're saying through, you can seek the objective you're talking about.
Interesting. But doesn't that show the will of Hamas, that they're willing to allow that to happen? And one other point, I sometimes
quickly, if you would,
about,
I do want to squeeze in a couple more questions.
Well, I don't know if this is fair or not, but aren't Palestinians to some extent supporting Hamas by not rebelling? But I don't know how hard or whatever it is. But couldn't they resist? Couldn't they do something?
Sound a bit like Kanye talking about slavery now, Richard. But you can answer that if you want.
Well, Richard, I think you're in danger of, and I apologise when I said this before, but I think you're in danger of making my point for me. It is not the case, Richard, that all Palestinians support Hamas. It's just not the case. And by the way, there are Christians in the Gaza Strip as well. And I think we've got to be very careful. We've got to be just very careful in assuming all 2.2 million people support Hamas. But also, I've got to say this: that some of the behaviours of the Israeli military, you can understand why, if you're in the Gaza Strip, you got a choice of the Israeli military or Hamas. you may choose Hamas. I'm not in any way condoning that. I've said quite clearly on a number of occasions it's a terrorist organisation, and I agree with you. There's no equivalence between a terrorist organisation and the state of Israel. But there are 2.2 million people in the Gaza Strip. It's the densest part of the world, or the second densest part of the world. 11,000 people have already lost their life. 4,500 children have already lost their life. At what stage is the Israeli government going to say this is enough?
Thank you, Richard. Ali in Worcestershire says, James, can I just say how refreshing it is to hear measured and well-argued comments from the Mayor after weeks of populist sound bites from the opposition on this and other subjects, whereas Dan says, why is this clown bleating on about Gaza when London is crumbling?
Can I explain that? Dan's raised a really important question.
Okay.
Dan, can I explain why I'm talking about Gaza? Firstly, I was asked by the callers to talk about Gaza,
and the huge
James.
Majority of the calls coming in are on this
secondly,
issue.
Dan, secondly, here's a point. There are Londoners affected by Gaza, Dan. There are Londoners affected by Israel. There are Londoners whose family died as a consequence of Hamas on October the 7th. There are Londoners whose family been kidnapped by Hamas from Israel. There are Londoners whose loved ones have been killed in the Gaza Strip as well. And in London, Dan, we're seeing a massive increase in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And in London, by the way, Dan, we had more than 300,000 people marching last Saturday, 2 weeks before more than 100,000, 2 weeks before that more than 100,000. So it does affect London. We're a global city, and it's really important that we talk about these issues rather than burying them away and not talking about them.
Another call, please.
Hi, good morning. The next caller is from Enfield, and it's David. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Sadiq. Hope you're well.
Oh, not bad at all. You okay?
Yes, I'm fine. As you know, Enfield is one of the major London boroughs. We've got a population of 320,000 people, and one of the most serious problems facing us at the moment is a growing homeless crisis. We've had a very sharp rise in Section 21 no-fault evictions in the past year. We've got a lot of families with small children, a lot of single mothers, living in local Travelodge hotel rooms for extended periods. We've got soaring rents. Some of the rents in Enfield have gone up 15% in the past year because of the withdrawal of buy-to-let landlords. And, for example, one is paying now £1,200 a month for a one room with a small shower. So my question is to you, as the Mayor, how many people across London, the other 31 boroughs, including Enfield, are living in temporary accommodation? And what are you going to do to solve the problem?
David, thanks for the question. David, I think housing is the biggest crisis facing our city. Biggest crisis facing our city. And to answer your question directly, across our city, there are 150,000 people living in temporary accommodation. And that temporary accommodation is often 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 years. It's not temporary at all. So what we've got to do is two things. One is we need to persuade the government to give us some more financial support to increase the supply of genuinely affordable homes. The good news is, over the last 7 years, we've started building more council homes than any time since the 1970s. We have completed more homes than any time since the 1930s. And last year, more permissions were granted, more than 55,000 than was the target. That's the good news. The bad news is at the current trajectory, it will take us decades for supply to meet demand. So there's a couple of things the government's got to do. One, we need more financial resources to build even more genuinely affordable homes. But two, in the meantime, David, those people living in the private rental sector have got challenges around affordability, challenges around security of tenure, and challenges around the quality of their home. The government's published a rental reform bill. It doesn't go fast enough in relation to Section 21 no-fault eviction. They've kicked the can down the road. But there's nothing in there in relation to affordability. In Scotland, because of lobbying by people like you and by the Labour Party and many others, Scotland agreed for 6 months to have a rent freeze.
Hang on a minute. You can't do that without mentioning the SNP.
No, the Scottish government. I'll come to
the
lobbying of the
Labour Party.
The lobbying
of the SNP.
The lobbying of the Labour Party.
Yes.
And
I think the SNP probably played a bigger role than the lobbying of the Labour Party.
Led to the Scottish government, led by the SNP, acceding to that lobbying. So they froze rents for the first 6 months, and they've only increased it by 3% for the next 6 months. And they're looking into rent controls. David, we need, in the short to medium term, rent controls to stabilise the private rental market.
Is that feasible, do you think, if Labour get into Westminster?
Well, look, what I'm trying to say to Labour, the Labour team in Westminster, is what's right for London may not be right for Luton. Devolve to us the powers to set up a commission, a private rent commission in London. And what we do, David, is we'd have on that commission landlords, tenants, experts and others to have a bespoke scheme for London. What we need, though, is a massive house building project that will begin after the next Labour government being invested. More council homes, more housing association homes, more market value homes, more shared ownership, because we've got to make sure we massively increase supply of new homes in London.
I want to squeeze in one more question, but first we've heard back from Dan, who you just addressed directly a moment ago. He says, in response to Mr. Khan's comments, I take on board what he's said and do in a way agree with him. I would also like to apologise for calling him a clown. These kind of exchanges will never catch on. Final question, I think.
The next caller, thanks, Dan. By the way, that's very gracious of Dan. On a serious note, that's very. And that's my point about agreeing, disagreeing agreeably. The next caller is from lots of West Londoners today ringing in. Mohammed, good morning, Mohammed.
Good morning, James, and good morning, the Mayor, Sadiq Khan. It's a pleasure speaking to you.
You too.
My question is, as someone who's had serious issues with the Metropolitan Police Service, and as you're in charge with the Home Secretary, with the Met, when is serious reform going to take place with the Metropolitan Police Service, and why is Baroness Casey's report just being put on the shelf?
Mohammed, thanks for your question. Before I answer your question, can I just raise one point, because it's really important. I say this. I want to pay tribute to the Met Police Service for the way they policed last weekend. It was a really good example of exceptional professionalism in the face of huge provocation. And the reason why I say that, Mohammed, is you've got to call out the good as well as calling out the bad. And when I'm told 3 officers have been hospitalised, when I'm told 8 officers have been injured, it reminds me that every day police officers go to work knowing full well they could have to make the ultimate sacrifice. They could be hurt, injured, and so forth. And so let's say that loud and clear to start off with, but also recognise there are systemic cultural issues in the police service, right? Dame Louise Casey found the police service to be institutionally racist, homophobic, and misogynistic as well. So what we've done, Mohammed, is act on those recommendations. We've got a new commissioner in Sir Mark Rowley, assisted by Dame Lynn Owens, the deputy commissioner. We've also set up a policing board for London, a cross-section of experts on that London policing board who will help me support the police, but also hold them to account. The good news, Mohammed, in the last year, because of this new commissioner, he's accelerated the number of officers who have got allegations against them should be disciplined. He's accelerated the number of officers who have been suspended. His frustration, which I share, is it's too hard to get rid of bad officers, to change the culture because of a lack of leadership, lack of training and so forth. And so we're lobbying the government for a change in the law. But in the meantime, when I tell you there are 800 officers who have been put on restricted duties, 200 officers have been suspended, that shows the pace of change this commissioner's bringing in. But I'm as impatient as you are for change, and we need to make sure London gets the police service it deserves.
Paul Condon, back in the day, after Macpherson, of course, accepted the description of the Met as institutionally racist, but Mark Rowley continues to refuse to do so.
Yeah, this is a good example of an issue that I don't agree with somebody about, but I can agree on all sorts of other issues. So Mark doesn't accept the definition of institutional racism, misogyny, or homophobia, but he does accept all the other analysis by Dame Louise Casey for reasons that Mark can describe better. He's got problems with the definition. That doesn't take away from the fact he's addressing the issues that Dame Louise Casey says need addressing to change the culture in the police service.
And institutionally corrupt as well. There was that other inquiry in
Daniel Morgan,
well.
I had the pleasure of speaking to Daniel's brother on your show, actually.
Of course you did. So I hear what you're saying, and Mohammed hears what you're saying, but both of us could be forgiven for going away thinking that the Met is currently just keeping its head down rather than trying to root out the problem.
No, that could be the allegation set against Paul Condon, which is talking the talk and not walking the walk. I think Londoners will see with the new policing board for London. Londoners will see by the numbers of officers who are facing dismissal. Londoners will see in relation to the sort of people we're now recruiting, more diverse, more women, people with more life experiences. But also Londoners will see by hopefully examples like the one I had last Saturday had the misfortune of having to attend the funeral of a child who'd been killed in Croydon, Eliane and in Croydon. Heartbreaking story, but at that funeral, hundreds of residents in Croydon gave a spontaneous round of applause to the local police who'd worked incredibly hard in that community. So my point with Eliane's funeral story is actually it's possible for good policing to win back trust confidence of a community. I want more examples of police officers working incredibly hard to earn the trust confidence of Londoners.
Thanks, Mohammed. And we are out of time. I will ask you this because you've alluded to it a bit. The Mayor of London would ordinarily expect to be in regular contact, if not necessarily clear cooperation with the Home Secretary. Does the change of personnel in that department please you this week?
Look, can I say I've spent more time with the new Home Secretary, James Cleverly, in the last week than the previous one in the last year.
Really?
And so I've had...
pound for pound?
Yeah, I've had, I think, 8 Home Secretaries since I became a mayor.
Crikey. So how much time did you spend with Suella Braverman?
So we had no bilaterals and no meetings. And you think about the Home Secs that I've worked with, from Theresa...
So even in the run-up to Saturdays, she wasn't talking to you at all?
Not at all. And so I've worked with Theresa May, Amber Rudd, Priti Patel, Sajid Javid, James Cleverly. Spent the time... Within the first 24 hours of James Cleverly being appointed, he made time to speak to me for, I think, half an hour, 45 minutes. And, put aside the party politics stuff, that's what grown-ups are going to do. You're the Home Secretary, jointly responsible for the police service with the Mayor of London. You care about the city, I hope. And I'm hoping it bodes well for the relationship between the Home Sec and the Mayor of London, but also for Londoners and the police service.
Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, many thanks.
See you soon.
We'll see you in a month. And remember, any questions that you want to put to the Mayor, you can. And even perhaps you can send in some snark by text and get a bespoke response, as Dan did, which he, I can tell from another message, he's absolutely delighted with. So thank you, Sadiq
Speak
Khan.
soon.
It's coming up to 22:11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let's have the latest headlines now with Holly Harris. It's 10:43. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where you almost... sometimes, do you ever pinch yourself and double check that you're not dreaming? How many times did I say to you that the more bogged down they get in the refugee stuff and the further we come away from the vote to control our borders and the evidence that we've ended up doing anything but, the more likely it becomes that they start casting around for some of the previous greatest hits. A bit like a sort of drunk club singer on stage who's forgotten all the tracks that he learned especially for tonight and therefore is reaching back into his own memory banks for the songs that he was singing 30 years ago. This is a description of the current government, of course, the current Conservative Party. None of the new stuff is landing or working. 7 bins Sunak and the meat tax. Sounds like a really rubbish band, that, doesn't it? 7 bins Sunak and the meat tax. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage 7 bins Sunak and the meat tax. That hasn't worked at all. They're tearing chunks out of each other over their refugee policies. The prospect of sending a couple of hundred people to Rwanda somehow overshadowing a backlog that is well over 100,000. I don't get that, and we're not coming back to that today because I can't bear Suella Braverman. I've talked about her quite enough. But the idea that the prospect of sending a couple of hundred people a year to an African dictatorship is somehow the most relevant element of a conversation about an asylum backlog, which is well over 100,000, is absolutely bonkers. And yet everywhere you turn in the UK media at the moment, everywhere you turn, it's been treated as if it's massively important. But it's not actually good for the Tories. This is crucial. It's crucial to understanding client journalism, because client journalism can move a bit, can't it? It can move from individual to individual, or it can stay loyal to the party. Staying loyal to the party in the current context involves doing the bidding or cuddling up to Rishi Sunak, whereas other elements of the media, most obviously today the Daily Telegraph, might go the other way and start looking out for Suella Braverman. The point is, that's not good for the Tories, right? Because they're biting chunks out of each other. So if you're dedicated to keeping the Tories in power, regardless of how awful they are, then the refugee stuff is actually beginning to lose some of its salience. Doesn't stop the Daily Mail because they can attack the House of Lords. So the Daily Mail is a masterpiece of mad sociopathic or psychopathic hatred. Who can we attack today? Who can we attack today after the party that we put in power and supported every single prime minister that we've had for the last 13 years? Who can we attack today for the fact that all their policies are failing? Let's attack the House of Lords for something that hasn't happened yet. So let's put 2 pictures of dinghies on the front page of our newspaper, dinghies full of people trying to get to the UK, and let's blame the House of Lords for doing something they haven't done yet. This is, just pause for a moment to imagine what it must be like to inhabit the brains of whoever it is that comes up with this stuff. I say brains, I think they've just got an enormous throbbing bile duct between their ears. And today's front page, unelected lords plot to block Rwanda law that could end scenes like this. Well, the claim that it could end scenes like this is built upon the idea that it would be a deterrent. James Cleverly, I think, said yesterday, they know it's a deterrent because the people who are coming here keep telling them. I'll let you work out why that's possibly not the most intelligent thing he's ever said. We know it's working as a deterrent because the people who are coming here tell us it's working as a deterrent when they get here. And then you've got the claim that it's the House of Lords' fault that this is happening because of something that they haven't done yet. So, as always with jingoistic or racist posturing, you have to keep running away from reality. You have to keep running away from reality. And that today involves, who can we attack now? We can't, oh, yikes, they're not ready to attack Rishi Sunak yet. The Telegraph are. They've sort of gone Team Braverman. Can we attack Gary Lineker? Can we blame this one on Carol Vorderman? Can we blame it on the woke mob? Can we blame it on the National... No, you can't blame it on Gary. He's not done anything, and he puts refugees up in his house, doesn't he? So we can't even accuse him of being a hypocrite anymore. Can you blame it on Carol Vorderman? No, we can't blame it on Carol Vorderman. She's more into the sort of financial shenanigans than the refugee issue. We can't really pin that. Can you blame it on the National Trust? The woke National... No, we can't blame these dinghies on the woke National Trust. Can't we just blame it on the government that's been in charge for 13 years and promised to quotes, control our borders, end quotes, when Brexit was... No, we can't do that because we were complicit in that con. We helped sell Brexit. We told our readers that we'd be... Oh, so who the hell are we going to be able to blame this on? Can we blame it on ourselves? Don't be ridiculous. You're fired. Get out. Can't blame it on ourselves, even though it's entirely our fault that the British public is absolutely twisted on this. Can we blame it on the House of Lords? No, we can't. Well, hang on just a minute. They haven't actually done anything yet, the House of Lords, but we could certainly tell our readers that they're about to stop the solution that would otherwise be happening, but hasn't for 13 years, just for reasons. So down with the House of Lords, into which the editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail is so desperate to move, so unbelievably sort of like buttock-clenchingly desperate to get into the House of Lords. So desperate to become a member of the unelected House of Lords that he gave Boris Johnson a free pass even as he was defecating all over national tradition, parliamentary sovereignty, contempt of Parliament after contempt of Parliament, catastrophic, carnage-inducing approaches to the handling of COVID-19. But throughout all of that, Johnson very cleverly dangled in front of this man, Paul Dacre. He dangled in front of him a little bit of ermine. Oh, you can be in the House of Lords. I'm a very tough man. I'm Paul Dacre. You can be in the House of Lords, but you've got to give up any pretense of journalism and turn the Daily Mail into a fanzine for the worst Prime Minister this country has ever seen. No problem at all. Leave it with me, Boris. Would you like a column when they finally chuck you out? And he got one. So that's the unelected House of Lords that he's so cross with today. The one that he would give his left leg to be in. That's how ridiculous and twisted they are. So anyway, the House of Lords getting the black. So what are they going to do? What are the papers that want to keep the government sweet? Who are they going to get you? Who are you supposed to be hating today? Answers on a postcard, please. Or you can tweet at Mr. James OB. Threads, I'm on Threads as well. Sometimes I even remember to look at it, at Mr. James OB. You could text 84855. Who are we supposed to hate today? Do you know? Have you worked it out yet? Have you heard? Has anybody told you? Who are we supposed to hate today? Because we can't go, the refugee, the marchers. We tried the marchers. We called them hate marchers. You can't make it more transparent than that. Go and hate them. And then they stayed all peaceful when the Neanderthals that danced to Suella Braverman's tune turned up, and they were the ones kicking up and hospitalising the police. So we can't really blame them either. Oh man alive, we need someone new. Who can we go for? We've done... You know what we're going to have to do, don't you, lads? We're going to have to announce a benefits crackdown. We can't announce a benefits crackdown. They'll see through us like a bloody plate glass window, boss. No, we've got. Shh. Listen, says Rishi Sunak, if I'm mentioning Jeremy Corbyn twice in the first 5 minutes of PMQs, then it's pretty clear how desperate we are for some sort of distraction from the fact that we are doing appallingly, and Keir Starmer is not only holding it together, but over 20 points ahead of us in the polls. We're heading for UKIP numbers, lads. What are we going to pull out? And what's quite tragic about the state of British politics is that Rishi Sunak is Mother Hubbard. He has become old Mother Hubbard, and he has gone to the cupboard, but sadly the cupboard is bare because they've used up all the refugee rhetoric, and it's actually backfired on him because now Suella Braverman is using it to attack him. The strikes are continuing to unfold sporadically and continue to enjoy public support, so they can't really pin any of the problems that they're creating on the trades unions. The attempt to cast himself as an agent of change, although objectively ridiculous, hasn't even cut the mustard with the faithful, because you can't be in power for 13 years and then say, vote me, vote change. It just doesn't work. Tragically, from the Mother Hubbard's cupboard point of view, the war on the motorists doesn't exist. So that little uptick of optimism that came after the by-election result in Ruislip and Uxbridge, because they persuaded a lot of people that the ULEZ charge was going to affect them, it's now petered out. It's deflated like have you ever put a piece of sellotape over a balloon and then put a pin in it? Have you ever done that? So it deflates very slowly. It's quite cool. You can do magic tricks if you don't tell anyone about the sellotape. You can do you not know this? Have you never done this? You can hold a balloon, put a nice bit of clear sellotape on it, get a pin, and then go, behold, I am Jimbo the Great, conjurer extraordinaire. And then you can I used to do this at children's parties. We did also get a professional entertainer. I'm not a complete monster. And then you can stick the pin into the bit where the sellotape is and the balloon doesn't deflate. But it doesn't pop, rather. But of course, when you take the pin out, it deflates very slowly. And that's what's happened to Rishi Sunak's war on motorists. It's deflated very, very slowly, like sort of wet flatulence. And the reason for that is that there was no real war on the motorists. People getting cross with plant pots are unlikely to deliver a general election victory. So the unions are not in the cupboard. The motorists or the anti-motorists are not in the cupboard. The National Trust, they cancelled Christmas earlier this week until you looked upon the website and found in a nanosecond at least 50 Christmas celebrations that the National Trust is hosting this year. The refugees is backfiring horribly because they've started using it as ammunition in a circular firing squad. The homeless, we could have gone after the homeless, but bloody Braverman's nicked that one as well with the announcement that she was going to confiscate all their tents. You could blame the French, suggests this texter. We could blame them for the boats coming. I think there was a woman on Question Time last night blaming the French for it, which that works a bit, but it's not a policy, is it? You can't turn the British people against the French. It's not the Battle of Agincourt. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do instead of doing some governing, instead of doing some actual politics? What are we going to do? Who are we going to hate? Who are we going to attack? And the answer is, we're going to have a benefits crackdown. Hello, client journalists. Yeah, could you get very cross about unemployed people tomorrow? Yeah, could you get that? Get people ringing in saying, I know someone who's unemployed and he lives in a mansion. And then get someone else ringing in, I know someone who's unemployed and he eats foie gras and caviar for breakfast every day. I know an unemployed person. He's got 47 children who've all got their own cars. And the oldest is only 11. Can we sort that out? Do you think we can do that tomorrow? Can we get that? Can we get that on the front page of the Times, maybe? Telegraph's gone a bit rogue. Mail is obsessing about the unelected House of Lords that the editor-in-chief is desperate to be in. But we could get it on the front of the Times, do you think? The front of the Times? Get it on the front of the Times. Benefits crackdown. And then, of course, you need some detail. What is the benefits crackdown? Well, we've already taken away most of their money. We've got people in work now who need to use food banks. We've got genuine hygiene poverty, people who are running out of money before they've run out of months, so they genuinely can't afford soap. It's quite easy to understand the idea of not even having a quid in your pocket. It happens to millions of families in this country, something that Rishi Sunak just fails completely to appreciate. So people are running out of money. The last benefits crackdown and the one before that and the one before that have left people really, really struggling. So what can we take away from them now? Well, we've got to come up with something. Could we take away their NHS prescriptions and their dentistry and the help that they get with energy bills? I don't know it's a Christian country, isn't it? Not really. We completely ignore the Archbishop of Canterbury and everything he has to say about refugees or the situation in Gaza. But do you think should we announce that we're going to take away unemployed people's dentistry and NHS prescriptions? I think we're going to have to, lads. I mean, look at the cupboard. There's nothing in it at all. But you're talking about the poorest people in the country, most of whom we've spent 2 years saying can't get GP's appointments or can't get to see their dentist. Yeah, what you're doing there is you're making the mistake of thinking that this is substantive or real. This is politics, Tristram. We're going to announce something about people who other people already hate, and we're going to announce that we're going to be extra mean to them. So you're really going to take away NHS prescriptions for poorly people who haven't got jobs? Yes. Well, we're going to announce it. Whether we actually do it or not remains to be seen. And there it is, new benefits crackdown if jobless don't accept work. And I've been, I hope, mildly amusing in the build-up to this point. But my God, how low can we go? So you have the entire cabinet dedicated to coming up with ideas that might improve the Tories' positionings in the polls. They've come up with the idea of removing free healthcare, free dentistry and NHS prescriptions from an almost non-existent constituency of unemployed people who are in receipt of both of those things as a punishment for not trying hard enough to find a job. And it will probably not be that hard to find people who think it's a great idea because, they know someone who once went out with someone whose mum was on the rock and roll and lived in Magaluf. But that's the government. That's not a daft newspaper editor who's desperate to be in the House of Lords while simultaneously attacking the House of Lords. That's the government. The government have sat around a table desperate to come up with something that will make them look good, or make them more popular, or appeal to their supporters. And they've decided that the only thing left is to launch another benefits crackdown, but they can't really take any more money away from these people because they're already using food banks. So what they're going to take away instead is dentistry and NHS prescriptions. I'm going to ask you after the news if you have experience of this world, if you work within it, or you have had recourse to the welfare state in recent years, and it has to be recent. I don't think this is real politics. That's going to be the question that I'm going to ask. I don't think this is real. I think this is... I wish I could swear, actually. I swore a bit yesterday, but only because James Cleverly did. He used a swear word to describe the Rwanda plan before he became the Foreign Secretary charged with delivering the Rwanda plan. I think this is complete and utter rollocks. I think it is designed entirely to give nasty people something to shout about for 24 hours. But I could be wrong, and I really hope I'm wrong. Because if I'm right, we've got a government that's looking around for where it can save a few quid and deciding that medicines for the poorest people in the country would be a good start, while simultaneously proposing reductions in the inheritance tax paid by the richest 5%. Just pause and think about that for a minute. Where are we going to get the money from? Oh, medicine for poor people. Yeah. And who are we going to give money to? The tiny proportion of the population who leave so much money when they die that their heirs have to pay inheritance tax. It's 11:02. So the way it will work is this. They say, right? And it's been, as I say, it's been fed to the Times. So a few thousand people currently on universal credit will be tracked using new tools. And if it is found that they are not trying hard enough to find a job, they will lose their free NHS prescriptions, their free dentistry, and their help with energy bills. They can call it a benefits crackdown, and I think I've already waxed lyrical enough about what I think about this in principle. But I want you to tell me whether or not you think it's real politics. They're talking about some 1.1 million people who they believe this would help to look for and stay in work. So there's 1.1 million people currently gorging themselves on free prescriptions and dentistry. That would be the same dentistry that the news reports today are telling us contains so many waiting lists that children are having all their baby teeth removed as a consequence of not getting treatment in time. But don't let that distract you from feeling furious with unemployed people. They will be asked to take part in work placements, requiring them to take a job at the end or risk losing their income under trial plans. But sanctions will also be ramped up, meaning that people who do not seek employment will lose all support after 6 months, including free NHS prescriptions, dental care, and help with energy bills. Here's the bit. It is thought that such measures would affect, wait for it, tens of thousands of people. So not even enough to fill the vacancies in the NHS. But I want you to talk to me a bit about logistics, please. A bit about logistics. Let's pretend that there are millions and millions of people choosing to live in abject poverty. Okay? And the only way you can get them out of abject poverty is to take away their free NHS prescriptions and their free dentistry, and to make them even poorer. Okay? So that's what you're going to do. And there are tons of jobs into which these people could be moving now. This is the fundamental premise of this policy. There's loads of jobs that these people could and should be doing, but they're not, because living in abject poverty is a lifestyle choice. A bit like living in a tent is a lifestyle choice, as Suella Braverman claimed last week. And even if it's true, would this work? That's the question I'm asking you. I don't know who's qualified to answer it. Long-term unemployed, people who work for what we used to call the DSS, doctors, dentists, chemists. Would this work? Poor people. I mean, would this work? Even if the problem was exactly as these clowns describe it, these vampires describe it, and even if the numbers were significant enough to make a meaningful change, would this actually work? 0345 6060 973. And listen, if you're one of the people this is designed to delight, we can have a chat as well. Give me a ring and tell me why you think it's a great idea to take medicine away from the poorest people in the country. 0345 6060 973. I got my vote. Don't just take the medicine away. Take their shoes. Take their shoes away as well. No shoes for the unemployed. Actually, that sounds a bit like a Jacob Rees-Mogg campaign slogan. Heather's in Broxburn in Scotland. Heather, what would you like to say?
Hi there. one thing that did occur to me while you were speaking was the false economy and taking away people's prescriptions. Obviously, I'm in Scotland, where we have free prescriptions for all.
Yes, and in fact, Stuart's crossed with me already as well. He keeps saying the state of British politics or the British voters when talking about the Tories in the media promoting their vile bilge. It's the English voters, James, who are the only ones swallowing it. The Scots and the Welsh haven't swallowed it for years. It's the English who need help. Language matters, dear boy. So thank you, Heather, for addressing Stuart's perfectly justified objections.
Well, the point I was going to raise was the understanding I have of why the Scottish and presumably Welsh government decided for free prescriptions is because it costs more for the NHS to treat emergencies that are caused by people not able to fill prescriptions.
So here we are, doubling down on the most vulnerable people in society. We're going to take away their medicines, and presumably the next stage is to ban them from hospitals.
Presumably, because obviously punishment always helps people get into work.
Absolutely. Is it feasible, though, even if we were to pretend for a moment that these vampires are talking sense, would this plan address this supposed problem?
I can't see that it does. My work is mostly with disabled people, and the reason why they're not able to work has nothing to do with any changes that they're making. We need changes from employers, more acceptability of people needing to be off sick or needing to have hospital appointments, maybe not being reliable employees in the same way they would like. You know, we need employers to be adjustable, not more sanctions on people.
Well, they're not even part of this equation, are they? So, you know, you're sitting there running a bistro or a canning factory, and you're a bit short of staff. You're trying to get some new staff, and these people, these sort of this supposed cohort of people who haven't worked for 10 years are going to be kind of corralled into your works canteen, given an outfit, and then sent to work. How many, in your experience, you work in this field, I think.
Yeah.
How many people are loving it? Living it up and loving it on unemployment benefit?
Absolutely no one I speak to. I speak to dozens of people a week, and no one is enjoying being unemployed, especially with ill health, because all you do is sit around and think about how worthless society thinks you are and how bad your life is. It's really depressing. No one wants to be unemployed. I was unemployed for a number of years due to my ill health, and It was the worst time of my life.
Why does it land then? A different kind of phone-in host could get a few calls now from people saying, "Oh, it's outrageous. Yeah, take away their medicines and their shoes."
I think it's the envy. It's the idea that you're getting something for nothing. But I don't think those people have ever experienced unemployment, because if they would, they'd realise how demoralising and horrible it is.
It's remarkable, isn't it? So 300,000 people who've been unemployed for over a year in the 3 months to July. The idea that they are almost all loving it, living it up and loving it is my catchphrase of the day, Heather. I don't know if you've noticed. Living it up and loving it is... I mean, it's obnoxious to the point of absurd, or it's absurd to the point of obnoxiousness. I don't know which way around it is.
Just look at the figures, how much people actually get. It's around about £80 a week. And yes, you might get most of your rent covered, but everything else, you've got to pay out of that money.
So you know, food, £16 a day for everything. Thank you, Heather. A timely reminder. And of course, you're perfectly entitled to tell me that, well, they work cash in hand as well, in which case this won't actually be applying to them particularly, because this is about the people who are not working, not the people who are working on some sort of underground economy. Claire's in Wimbledon. Claire, what do you reckon? Living it up and loving it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sitting here drinking champagne as we speak, James. It's fantastic.
Right, you must be one of those unemployed people I keep hearing about.
I am one of those unemployed people with, 2 children, single mum, scum of the earth, we're all claiming benefits, not doing anything. It's not like that. It's absolutely horrendous. And it just feels, me and my friends discussed this, it feels like we're being punished for being poor.
Well, you are. It doesn't feel like... Well, I mean, that's why the question I'm asking is whether or not this is actually real politics, or whether you just have the temporary but profoundly unpleasant experience of being the thing that the government is encouraging its supporters to hate today.
Well, I'm the scapegoat for today, because it takes our mind off everything else that's going on for the minute, doesn't it? It takes everybody's minds off everything else that's going on, and I think it's a tactic. However, if people actually realise how people are suffering, if this does go ahead, which I really, really hope it doesn't. It would just affect so many people. And also, how are you meant to get people back into work if they need medication to survive and live? And you take that away and they can't afford to take it.
And then the costs
to go to work?
The costs to the NHS become even greater. I don't think, I tell you what, Claire, I don't think we're supposed to think about it, are we? We're supposed to just read out the headline and open up the phone lines.
Yeah. But, think about it logically, if people can these days, because people just have so much rubbish thrown at them by this government at the moment that they just go, oh my God, it must be true, this is this and this is that, and oh, look at these scum of the earth, like, we pay our taxes. Well, excuse me, I paid my taxes. I started work at 16 and I've paid my taxes. The benefits that I'm claiming at the moment are actually what I've paid in, and I know that probably sounds really...
It doesn't sound anything, and I'm not going to let you even apologise or justify. You shouldn't even have to say that out loud. I pay my taxes so that there's a safety net for people to fall into, regardless of whether ever I need it myself. There is one thing you could have done, though, differently. Did you ever think of being born to much wealthier parents?
I would have loved it. Yes, that would have been nice. Or married a nice rich man.
Yeah. Could you not find an heir to one of the biggest fortunes in the world? Because that works for Rishi Sunak.
Richie, who just finds $1 million down the back of his sofa for whatever. No, unfortunately, I didn't have that pleasure.
Well, then you must accept responsibility for the situation that you find yourself in. There was nothing to stop you being born to much richer parents or marrying wealth, was there, really, Claire?
No, of course not. It's just stuff. But people, they think we're all lording it up. And I know there are these programmes on the TV where it shows a certain element of people who may or may not be. And I know
do you
there
have
are,
any? Well, I know you do, but let me tell you, from this side of the Green Baize door, the effort and the energy that producers working on those programmes, all of whom absolutely hate themselves for the duration of that contract, the effort they have to put into finding people who fit the parameters of poverty porn is absolutely extraordinary, because they are man bites dog stories, therefore extraordinary, not dog bites man stories, which is what they look like by the time they're coming out of the box in the corner of our living rooms.
Oh, I know, it does look horrific sometimes, because you see them all like big screen TVs, leather sofas. Oh, look, they've all got Netflix and cable or Sky or whatever, blah, 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 blah. It's not like that, people. Please, please, please take a deep sense of reality. It really isn't like that. There are people genuinely struggling. I got sanctioned a couple of months ago because I had to go to a number of appointments with my son for his mental health.
Right.
And I couldn't attend the workplace-based in-centre job seekers interview, and I got sanctioned.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
That means you get money stopped. And it can be without giving a reason, but the appointment was changed at a very swift notice because the guy changed it from a week ahead to a week behind.
Right.
So we had to go in, or else my son wasn't going to be seen for another 6 to 8 months, which would have been really bad. So I did email them. You get a journal, which you have to type in, and you type in your reason, and I was sanctioned because I couldn't provide the medical evidence because the appointment was for the week ahead. Yeah. And I asked the guy, could he write me a letter to say that he'd moved the appointment? He said he would, and he didn't. It's a long story. Sure. It all got sorted out in the end.
Good.
But I was sanctioned for a month. It was so hard. It was one of the most brutal. I mean, it was really hard. We had to scrimp down on food. We didn't put heat. We were cooking very, very. Couldn't do the gas. Couldn't use the oven.
How old are the kids? How old are your kids?
My kids are 11 and 14 now. But obviously at that age, especially the girl, she wants to be baths and showers were restricted. I know that sounds awful. Food was literally going to the supermarket at the end of the day to see if there was any yellow sticker bargains, which was always fun. And
you're the target.
When the kids were at school, nothing on at all, turned all the sockets off, no TV, listening to the radio, you guys, hey.
Well, don't make it sound that bad, Claire.
I'm sorry, I probably do sound like I've got a violin playing, especially for me. But
I'm just joking about the radio bit. The rest of it's not violin playing, but I can hear in your voice that you're not entirely comfortable sharing this, but it's important that you do.
But I want people to know, because it is so hard, and people think we're all having a jolly up and we're all hitting Wetherspoons at 8 o'clock in the morning to have like a fry up and a beer. We're not. We're all sitting here cold, people trying to find work. Do you know how many people apply for the same job?
Tell me.
Each time. Well, I've applied for several jobs, and I was number 67 in a list, the guy told me.
And here it is. No claimant should reach 18 months of unemployment in receipt of their full benefit.
How do you have also, the trouble is, because my son is suffering from mental health issues at the moment, he lost his father, so it's affected him quite badly, and my daughter as well. Yeah. I have a point where he has really, really good weeks. He can go a couple of weeks really, really good, and then he'll just go into this massive depression. He's under. Eventually, we got CAMS to come and sort him out.
Well, I know what that means. I know how bad things.
I
know how bad things must have been for you to even get into a CAMS appointment. So you don't need to tell me more.
So we finally got there, but he's still undergoing counselling and things, which is helping him, and he's a lot better than he was, but he's still not anywhere near how he was. So in order for me to get a job, which I know again sounds like I'm making excuses, I'm really not. I'm trying to find remote work at the moment, because this is the only way I can think of doing it, is to say that I'm here, because I can't go to work at 9 o'clock and then at 11 o'clock get a phone call from my son's school saying you have to come and get him or come and see him because he's having an episode.
No. And that's something else. That's something else.
Imagine if I was working for you, James, and I said to you, so I know how halfway through a show, but I've got to go now because I'll be back probably by the time you're finished.
Yeah, Keith does that, Claire, quite often.
I bet he does.
I don't know if anyone notices.
It's hard to find somebody that can work with you.
No, I do understand what you're saying.
It's night work, but then I have no one to look after my son and my daughter at night, and they're too young, I personally believe, and my son, the way he is, to be left for any number of hours on their own. You couldn't. And also, if I did do that, I was told that social services would come after me. So what do I do? Well, come and sanction me then. Come and take my healthcare away. Come and take my dentistry away. But then I don't know what else you want me to do.
I'm sorry.
No, you haven't got anything to apologise for.
I do. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've just got basic sympathy for what you're going through, but I'm also sorry that you have to be exposed on top of this to the hatred, the deliberately stoked up hatred of fellow members of the public that the Tory party and, very sad to say, some people who do what I do for a living send in your direction.
Yeah, it's all right.
This is all right. Yeah, well, all I can say in consolation is I think there's more chance of more chance of Suella Braverman winning Humanitarian of the Year award than there is of this ever actually becoming policy. I truly believe, Claire, it is designed solely, as you said right at the beginning, for the sort of 21st century equivalent of George Orwell's 2-minute hate. Let's all hate Claire today, because you just heard her story. Yeah. It's 11:22. 25 minutes after 11. So even if we accept the premise that people like Claire are living it up and having a laugh on universal credit and are not suffering at all and are choosing to be cold and hungry a lot of the time, even if we accept all of those premises, how feasible is it that taking away the free NHS prescriptions and dental care of people in her position will somehow compel or enable her to take a job that she cannot currently take? That's what's horrible here. But that's why we're coming at it from the plausible angle. How plausible is this? Because I don't think this is real politics. I think that this is spoon-fed to sympathetic journalists, and when the Times rang back Downing Street and said, how's this? We're going with this on our front page. Look for a job or lose free NHS medicines. Then Downing Street responded, yeah, thanks, lads. Excellent. Checks in the post. Look for a job or lose free NHS medicines. But it is possible that there are loads of people out there living on 80 quid a week or whatever it is who don't want to look for a job. And they may be the reason why some people are supportive of this. I've got loads of calls, so I should shut up for a bit. But I am thinking, don't nod that. Please, don't nod quite that enthusiastically. You're my colleagues. And people tune in to listen to me. Not your silent snark in the background and your nodding heads. I will now take a lot more calls, but I am going to add a question when I have some room on the switchboard, which is, why does it work so well? You know, like the anti-James that I tell you about sometimes. The James who does the radio phone-ins that are a bit 1970s. So I could today be encouraging you to ring in and tell me why it's a great idea to take medicine away from the most vulnerable people in the country. Why does that work so well? What is it that it appeals to in people? And ideally, you can tell me what it appeals to in you. I'll remind you of the number shortly. It's 11:27. Kira is in Nottingham. Kira, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
so
Kira.
I'm not in the position of unemployment yet.
Right.
There's a big yet here. So I'm currently a university student and I'm autistic and I'm already struggling to cope with university. That's
I'm
already
sorry.
making me worry
Yes.
of will I be able to get employment, especially because my degree is in journalism.
Right.
And I want to work. I'd love to be able to work, but with my current experience with severe anxiety, being burnt out frequently and pushing myself through being extremely ill because of it,
Yes.
I don't know if I'll be able to take employment. I can't work around my studies like other people because I'm too disabled for it. And the governments will probably see autism as not disabled enough to class as being unable to work.
Or they will give you,
debilitating.
and this is you put me in a really unpleasant situation here, because they are talking about providing work coaches for people like you and NHS talking therapy, and that might be quite a good idea. I mean, it might not touch the sides of where you find yourself, but it could work for some people. But the idea that this lot are actually going to do it in good faith and with open arms is so beyond the realms of likelihood that you fear it would actually make everything worse. Do you see what I mean? We could spend money on helping you into the workplace and then therefore become a net contributor to society. But unless we're helping you unless we're carroting rather than sticking, it's going to have a negative effect. It's going to make things worse for you, not better.
Yeah, I get that, and I get talking therapy sometimes help, but it's found that a lot of autistic people do not benefit from talking therapy.
No, well, exactly.
I'm currently on a private counsellor. I can't even get on the NHS waiting list for talking therapy.
Well, at least they can't take it away from you.
No.
Have you
I
thought
get it
of?
could sometimes help as well, but
well, I'm glad to
if
hear
it
that.
doesn't, then you're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place. You're not disabled enough, but you can't get the help.
What do you feel on a day like today? Let me read you the front page of it. Look for a job or lose free NHS medicines. Now, I appreciate you're not in that position yet. You're just worried that you will be soon. Well, as a journalism student, looking at that front page, what's it designed to do?
Honestly, I think it's designed to cause a panic, especially a moral panic of we're spending all of these money on people who can't be bothered to work, but there's so many reasons why people can't, and it's not I can't be bothered. I'd love to have a job around uni. I'd love to. I sit on my free Fridays and go, I wish I could have a job. But if I took on a job, I would burn myself out and probably not get through my year.
Yeah.
And it's designed to cause panic and people to be scared of the fact that there are people who are unable to work for a whole amount of reasons. Like if I lost I don't have free prescriptions right now,
Right.
but if I did have free prescriptions and I lost them, how do they expect me to work if I don't have
I don't know.
antidepressants because the withdrawals are massive?
I think we're making the mistake of thinking about things, Kira. I think we're just supposed to read the headlines and start shouting at each other, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think that's what it's designed to do. I've got some good news, though. I don't know whether or not this is the kind of job you could do. I've just found a job. It's 8 hours a week for £250,000 a year, working for an investment firm founded and significantly owned by 2 sanctioned Russian oligarchs. Do you think that's the kind of thing you could do?
If it's supporting Russia, absolutely not.
Well, that's the gig that the former chair of the Conservative Party, Brandon Lewis, has just landed. A paid role advising an investment firm founded and believed to be significantly owned by 2 sanctioned Russian oligarchs. A great piece of work on the Substack of a journalist called Russell Scott that crossed my desk last night. So these jobs are out there, Kira, if you just look hard enough.
I mean, That's baffled me because it's supporting.
Well, it's not.
supporting
No,
Russia.
it's no. Well, it's just an investment firm that was founded by two sanctioned Russian oligarchs. I stress that the words significantly are in quotes, but I'll tweet that from my account in case you want to read a little more of Russell's work. And I wish you well with your studies as well, Kira. 11:32 is the time. Holly Harris has the headlines. I suppose one thing that occurs to me is if you are minded to support benefits crackdowns, because hey ho lads, we're having another one. We're going after the people who are really responsible for the state of your finances. It's the people who've got considerably less than you. Shouldn't you be cross with the politicians who brought you the last benefits crackdown and the one before that and the one before that? Does that ever occur to these monsters? There's another benefits crackdown. Hooray! Hang on a minute. Didn't you promise us the last one was going to get rid of all the flat screen TVs? What happened to the last? Do you see what I mean? It's odd, isn't it, how this stuff unfolds? Natasha is in Yeovil. Natasha, what made you pick up the phone?
This morning, listening to Nick's show and having people call in and basically villainise a very, very small percentage of the population who need to claim from the state. I mean, my personal story is I have two disabled children that I didn't know were disabled when I was pregnant with them. I had a very good job. I now get benefits because of my child. So I've gone down to just over $7,000 a year in benefits. And it just makes me so upset that... No, it's fine. I am a first-time caller, and this is slightly terrifying, hence the shake in my voice.
Well, you're doing brilliantly, and you can have as much time as you want, and you don't need to say sorry for anything.
No, I just don't understand the need to villainise people. I mean, my oldest daughter will never work, so as far as this government's concerned, she's never going to be a productive member of society. But the change my daughter has made and the people around her, I don't care about money anymore.
Tell me about that change. Tell me a bit about your daughter.
My daughter, she's got Rett syndrome, which is a neurological condition, which means that she can't do anything for herself. So right. I'm a carer. I get carer's allowance, which is fantastic, but it's meant to be for people that do over 35 hours a week. I do an average of 160, and that is taken into consideration. She's at school 5 days a week. Yeah. It falls completely on me. My husband is amazing. He works. We would financially probably be better off if he didn't, but that's not the sort of people we are.
How come? Just out of interest, logistically.
We would get more benefits.
Right.
We'd get more benefits. We'd have access to more benefits. We'd have access to things like help with our mortgage.
Really?
Which because we should never have bought a house. If we'd known Lily was disabled, we never would have done. We bought a house when she was 6 months old. Right. We didn't know anything was wrong with her till she was nearly a year. And it's very lonely world being part of the disabled community. I'm not disabled, but I'm an advocate for my children. And it's terrifying. And the government just seems to want to take, and it's minuscule money. I mean, they say how huge it is. It's not. It's minuscule, the amount of money compared to everything else that they could claw back.
I didn't hear the calls you're referring to this morning, but I don't know that the policy, if we can describe it as such, would affect people in precisely your situation.
No, it probably wouldn't, but it would my son. My son is, he's on the autistic spectrum. He's 7 years old. He is going to struggle to work. He's going to need a lot of support. And yes, he will have a job with my support. I will make sure that he does something because I think it's very important. But it's the fact that it's the huge emotional stress it's going to put on people because a few people are ripping off the system, and that's the problem. It's the woman rang up this morning and she said a lady had 5 children, and it was almost a blame of she shouldn't have had the children.
Well, no, I've heard them say that. You shouldn't, unless they're being privately educated and you're worried that you won't be able to cover the cost of the fees when they remove the VAT exemption. In that case, you can never say, well, if you can't afford children, you shouldn't have had them. But if you were earning if you were earning decent money and you had some children, and then for whatever reason it may be, you're suddenly not earning decent money, then you should not have had children if you can't afford them. But if you're worried that you might not be able to pay £20,000 a year in school fees instead of 17.5 or £15,000, then you get enormous sympathy. That you get nothing. In fact, I will break open the world's largest violin to play you a sonata, because that is the kind of financial suffering that I understand. Natasha. Sorry, I turned into Anti-James then.
I am from a public school background. Yeah. I went to public school. I know that it's probably a better system, but it's not. But we can't afford that. And that, yes, exactly. Unless you can.
There's the system. Why do you think it works? Why do you think it does work? Why do you think people are so keen to take up the invitation to read the words benefits crackdown and not stop to wonder about anything except how hate-filled and angry they are?
Because we need to blame someone, and we need to
what for
jump
though?
on
What
something.
for my own life? Am I blaming? Right.
Yes. Well, because they see that for example, myself would be sitting there doing nothing. I run a support group for parents with disabled children. I am part of my children's PTA because that's what you do. I do as much as I can do, and I'm exhausted. I'll be honest. Having a child with physical disabilities is very tiring. But they just think we do nothing. They think I'm out shopping, buying clothes, and going on holiday. We haven't been on holiday in 7 years, so I don't know where people get this idea from. I
mentioned 5 children because I'm pretty sure they took away child benefit for any children above 2, didn't they? Anyway.
I have 3 children, and I don't guess my second child was born in 2017. So no, we get it for 2 children. We get child benefit for 2. Exactly. Anyone before that, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The other side of it is that they're saying we need to have more children because there aren't enough future people for the workforce.
Because that's to get rid of the That's to get rid of all the immigrants. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, no! Don't get me started on that, Nick.
No, I won't. We'll do that another day. I promise. Now that you've found your feet on air, Natasha, I look forward to. I appreciate how busy you are. Probably the last thing you need is me popping up in your appointments diary as well. But you make a very important point. You tell a very important story, and although this particular so-called policy may not apply directly to you, it's pretty clear from a media perspective what the words benefits crackdown are designed to do in the minds of your neighbours. Not literally your neighbours, I hope, but the people you live alongside.
It's hate. This country is becoming more and more hateful. I find it terrifying. I really do. I think we're going backwards rather than forwards. We were becoming really pro-disability, and we were becoming very inclusive in a really good way. Yes. And now we're going back to my neighbour. Look at them.
Woke, were we getting a bit too woke when it came to accommodating people with disabilities?
Exactly. And then I don't understand why we have to look at people are people. And I think the whole, I could start the whole conversation about everything, immigration, etc., etc. My grandparents were German. They went to America. They then came here. I mean, it's I just don't. But it's coloured skin, isn't it? It is classic.
It's all of the above. I'm glad that you've laughed during this call. Yes. I'm glad that you've laughed. Thank you. Well, no, thank you. And go on.
I do listen to LBC regularly. My husband calls it the depression radio station, but I'm afraid I quite like it.
He's listening to the wrong programme. You may have got a hint of that earlier in your call, but I'm very proud to be able to keep you company during the day, Natasha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good day. Thank you.
You too. It's coming. There you go. That's the kind of person we need to be clamping down on, isn't it? With our children. Oh dear, it's just terrible. I know a bloke who knows a woman who's got 7 kids. That's why we need to have a clampdown on people like Natasha. My God, it's 11:45. I've got some good news for you in a minute, but first a clarification via text. There's no 2-child limit on child benefit, James. It's the child element of universal credit, a separate benefit that you're thinking of, just to clarify, but it is important. Even more important, this is not a happy hour. Is it? Actually looking at the facts of benefits crackdowns and living in such circumstances. But the government is actually there's some good news. If you are one of the 4% of estates eligible for inheritance tax, set perhaps to rise to 7% this year. It was 4% in 2020, 2021. Then Jeremy Hunt is poised to halve the rate of your inheritance tax. So the tax you pay on wealth that is being passed on to heirs will be cut at the same time that they announce a benefits crackdown. Now, I mean, people have been sharing very personal information with me today. This is the sort of story that reminds me that this government is constantly trying to give me money while take it away from people like Natasha and Claire and Kieran. And I find it very hard to understand. This government, every time there's a budget, Liz Truss's thing, I did the sums on that. Liz Truss's thing was like 3 melons coming up on a fruit machine for me. Constantly trying to give me money. Jeremy Hunt, constantly trying to give me money. Kwasi Kwarteng, writing me cheques. Rishi Sunak, handing me cash. And taking it away in the same breath, on the same day, in the same news cycle. From people like Natasha, Kira and Claire. It's a funny old world, isn't it? I wonder if you can make sense of it. Alex is in Reigate. Alex, is it workable? Could it work?
No.
Oh.
In a simple word, no.
Go on,
no.
Tell me more.
I can tell you that from experience on being on the other side, should I say, or the dark side. Like, from my caseload, the people that they're after are a tiny, minuscule percentage. I mean, I'd probably be able to just give them the money out of my own pocket and they wouldn't even notice.
Right. You mean people who actively choose to live on the pittance that the state provides and make no effort to find a job? That is really the constituency of people that we're talking about here.
Exactly.
And no one's suggesting that they don't exist at all, but the idea that they exist on a scale sufficient to justify government policies and tabloid rage is ridiculous.
Yeah, put it this way, it would be like trying to find a flea on a postage stamp. You would not be able to see it.
Okay. So I've never heard that figure of speech before. Go on.
Yeah, well, you know.
So how would it, I mean, but tell me more about the sort of enforcement or how this kind of thing would work, because that's the line you were in, I think. That's correct. Say like Claire and her sanctions earlier. Normally, when the sanctions come about, they are tier level. So you'd start off like a percentage of whatever they earn on the first instance. Yeah.
Then it would go up by half again.
Yeah.
To whatever, it's almost like 50% would be like the third time, and then the fourth time you'd literally lose all of your benefits. So you're then expected. Like, I've had client, a young lady. She was about a teenager.
Yeah.
She got to because I would just as a work coach just assume she was one of these people that just have no interest in coming in and making the appointments. You know, we'd write out the claimant commitment. And this is the contract for the receipt of benefits, you know.
Okay, yes,
it's
I
the
understand.
Agreement. And it turned out the reason why she was missing appointments is because she was caring for a parent. Nobody knew. And she felt too embarrassed to say that.
That's like the Tracy Chapman song, Fast Car, isn't it? Actually, almost the same plot. Yeah. Remarkable.
Yeah, so she lost all of her money. She wasn't even living at home. She was living in one of these shared accommodations. I don't know if I can mention who they are.
No, but whatever you're comfortable doing. But then she's going back to the family home to look after a parent.
Exactly that.
Because no one else was doing so.
That's it. So technically, she could have got carer's allowance had she, but she was trying to do the right thing. You know, try to go to school, try to come back. Do everything that you would turn up at appointments. Okay, she couldn't have got to all the workshops, because that was time that she had to go and spend to look after the parent at home.
Days.
And then she didn't turn up, and then the system automatically goes, well, you didn't turn up, this is your claimant commitment. That will get thrown in her face. And there wasn't any discretion there, because the new rules for work coaches is that you also have a case manager that will then look at it. But when a case manager looks at it, they look up what the case, the claimant agreement was, what the law says, and that's about it. There isn't too much for them to move on, and they will act upon it. It's only by chance that me being the person that I am, I walked along my high street and then I saw her with her. And then I was like, oh, blah, blah, blah. How are you? How come you didn't make your appointment? And then she sort of like said, oh, well, I was looking after my mum. And I was like, well, how come you hadn't mentioned this before? And there are loads of people, both young and old, that are in that same situation, and now they're going to get caught out by this trap. I will call it a trap because that's what it is, and it's not going to be affecting those people, the flea on the postage stamp, that are sitting at home not doing anything.
So here's the thing.
Happy to lift it.
Here's the thing that you know, but some people listening won't. At present, people who refuse to take a job. So even the choice of language in a normally sober newspaper like the Times, it's refuse to take a job rather than people who can't. But they refuse to take a job or attend interviews and coaching can have their benefits docked. That's the young lady you're talking about.
Yep.
But ministers want to go further and shut benefit claims entirely if people have been disengaged for 6 months. So the word disengaged is in quotes, it's their words. So they reckon tens of thousands of people would lose all their benefits, but also other state services where eligibility is linked to receipt of benefits. What happens to those people, Alex?
It's really hard to understand. It's like one of your earlier callers said, like if they lose the like the free prescriptions, for example, and they need that just to sort of for their day-to-day living, or even to apply for jobs, like especially with anxiety and depression. I know there's some people that use it as an excuse, but for those that actually need the medicine and they're going there and they're going, all it's going to do is now, once they've got no money to now go and pay for that medication, and then they're just going to be turning up at the NHS in A&E, and someone was saying like it costs like £100 and something every time they go in there, and so it's just going to push the cost up more than what the benefit they get.
What's extraordinary is that this is built entirely, this sort of rhetoric, because I hope it doesn't qualify as policy. I can't see how it could, but this sort of rhetoric is built entirely upon the belief, I think, or certainly upon the impression, trying to give the deliberate impression that everybody is swinging the lead. Everybody is taking the mick. And yet the reality is that even if a few people are, the massive majority are not. And yet all of this targeting is built upon the notion that they're all swinging the lead, isn't it? It's the only way you can make sense of it. They just think all of these people must be choosing to live on tuppence halfpenny a week in cold, hungry circumstances. I always remember the wife of a teacher in Cromer. I don't know if you were listening that day, telling me about her children's indoor coats, the coats they wear indoors, so that they can put another coat on when they go outdoors, and it will provide them with a little bit more protection from the cold. People like Jeremy Hunt or Mel Stride or Rishi Sunak and the rest of them, they think that all of these people are choosing to live like that and would live differently if only the government was a bit meaner to them.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And like some people need to realise that everybody is almost one pay slip away from having to require benefits.
Yeah,
you know. And as civil servants, we just do the bidding of the people that are in power. I mean, I'll just say, talking to my colleagues, we'll be holding our head in shame and thinking, oh God, whatever next.
Yeah.
I mean,
but you've got to do it.
But we've got to do it because
you've got to enforce the sanctions because that's your job, and if you don't, then you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, I get in trouble all the time because I'm that sort of person. Like when I went and helped this young girl, I got all her money back. You know what I mean? Obviously, didn't get any interest, but after the situation was explained, yes, I did get a bit of a telling off, but it was a justifiable cause.
She would be entirely in this category. She would have been disengaged for 6 months, and therefore, I mean, the bit I don't get, and I'm almost frightened to ask you, is, I mean, if someone does end up caught in those claws, what do they do for money?
I would say they don't care, but it's not the DWP and the employees that don't, because you know what I mean. We would happily just give the money out of our own pocket.
No, but if I end up caught in that, between that sort of Scylla and Charybdis of bureaucracy and policy, and you remove all my benefits, what do I buy my tea with that night?
It's not. It's literally a case of like you're going to have to go to a soup kitchen or something, turn up with all the homeless that are out there. You know what I mean? It's a horrible, horrible thought, but it's like there's only so much we can do.
I know
because
that. I'm not having a go at you. I'm not having a go.
James, it's honestly heartbreaking. And you know what's coming, and you can see it, and you're looking at these people. I mean, like, say, like during the pandemic, there was people that got made redundant and things like that, and they all came onto the benefit system in their thousands. And it was just, people literally were crying down the phone saying how sorry they felt. This is stuff that you've paid into. You don't need to ask. It's yours. You're entitled to it. Okay, there are some people that may have had disabilities all their life and they might not be able. But somebody's been putting that. I've been putting that money aside in the pot, ready for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, it's not for me or for anybody in politics to sort of like say you can. Oh no, they're not doing anything. Let's take it away. No, you don't have that right to do that.
Beautifully put, Alex, and thank you. And as you say yourself from the cold face, it's coming up to 12 noon. I'm just going to read a message from David because I always take criticism on the chin. He says, I must take issue with your most recent monologue where you attacked unemployed people living in mansions with multiple children who've defrauded the state out of enormous amounts of money. Can't you leave Boris Johnson out of it for just one day? My apologies, David. I should perhaps have been a little clearer. Now, I'm going to introduce you next to an amazing guy who will hate me describing him as an amazing guy. I had the enormous privilege last night of once again presenting the Magnitsky Human Rights Awards in central London. You met one of the winners already, Karine Kanimba, and I obviously met all of them, including the gentleman that's coming on next, who, well, not to put too fine a point of it. Well, actually, just stay tuned and find out. It's 4 minutes after 12. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we take a bit of a tangential departure now from the conversation that was underway, referring back to what I told you earlier in the week about the Magnitsky Human Rights Awards. And you're about to meet one of the recipients. Let me first provide a little bit of background. One of the most extraordinary and I think underreported tragedies of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is the kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Ukrainian children essentially deported, really, to use a phrase that's in the news a lot at the moment, to Moscow, to Russia, where they are victims of attempted indoctrination. One man, Michael Kuleba, who is with me now, has taken it upon himself to try to bring them back and has so far succeeded in repatriating 204 Ukrainian children who were deported to Russia. And for this, last night, I was very proud to be on the stage when he received his Magnitsky Award for being the outstanding human rights activist of the year. Michael, thank you for coming in today. I suspect you may have had a late night.
Hi, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. How did you get into this? I know you started off your career in child protection in Ukraine, but this particular mission, how did you end up accepting it?
I started in late 90s where a lot of street children were on the streets, and it was thousands of children after Soviet Union collapsed. And I had a business, and one night I stopped on the street and I've seen some boys there. I tried to talk with them and give them money and food, and I couldn't understand how in my country children could live on the streets and could be abandoned. And every day after my job I stopped there, and more I was involved in children's issues, and I opened the first center for street children in the capital, in Kiev, and then second, and then third. It was a network of centers. I took these kids from the streets and recovered them and provide different kind of support. And for orphans, I found families. And yesterday you heard, during my speech, I talked about one case when I found one boy. It was one of the first boys who, with his younger sister, they lived years on the streets. I took them and recovered and found a family, a foster family, and they grew up in that family. And before yesterday, he was killed as a soldier. and he was fighting for our freedom. And yesterday we returned 2 orphans who've been captured from occupied territories. It's very mixed feelings, because we are rescuing somebody and somebody dying for our freedom.
So it's a remarkable circle. How do the abductions work? Is it? Are some Russian troops charged with finding children and sending them back to Russia? Is it an opportunistic event, or is it a very deliberate plan?
It's a clear strategy of Russia Federation. This abduction, it's not just something what happened.
Yeah.
And it was a clear plan to invade Ukraine, to clean this territory totally, to erase our identity, because Putin, it is through his speeches. He told that, what is Ukraine? It is a Russian state, and you can read in their books in Russian history. For children learn in Russia, Ukrainian children learn on occupied territories this history that Ukraine is just a region, a Russian region, and that's why his main idea is to destroy our identity. And it doesn't matter for him just to physically kill a child, but it is impossible now to kill anybody because you could be punished. You will have a lot of people who are against you. But it's better to take these children, transfer them to Russia, and brainwash, indoctrinate, and totally erase their identity.
The idea of being Ukrainian is eradicated.
Yeah.
Really. One of the young women that accompanied you onto the stage last night, two 16-year-old girls who you had rescued from Russia, one of them spoke of her little brother falling for the indoctrination.
Yeah.
And she somehow managed to persuade him to come home with her. I don't think she would have left Russia without him. But that was an extraordinary illustration of what you described, the idea that 2 siblings in similar circumstances, the younger one could be susceptible to the propaganda, to the brainwashing, while the older one could stay independent-minded. How many, and this is a hard question for me to ask, I didn't ask you this last night, how many do slip beyond your reach? How many do fall for the Russian brainwashing? Do we know?
We have to go back to 2014 when Russia invaded us first time, and Donbass and Crimea was taken, and now together with the kids who've been deported and who stays on new occupied territories, 1.5 million Ukrainian children who live under the Russians.
Right.
And maybe 99% of them have Russian citizenship now. And the Russian plan is instilled hatred towards Ukraine and weaponized these children. Many of young adults who've been school children 10 years ago in Donbass and Crimea are now fighting against Ukraine. They believe they are fighting against NATO and Nazi. Yeah. Can you believe? It's like something from a different planet. Yeah, and I can imagine my kids, if somebody can indoctrinate them, re-educate.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week is all they hear, all they see, all they receive.
And children who've been returned by Save Ukraine were reporting that sometimes Russian anthem played 5 hours a day in their camp. Can you imagine? You listening Russian anthem 5 hours a day.
You mentioned your charity Save Ukraine, which people can find out more about online. What do you do then? How does the actual process work of identifying, locating, and rescuing a Ukrainian child who has been deported to Russia? What do you do?
We have hotline and social media and people calling us, relatives or friends of these kids, and reporting that, I know this child live, for example, in Moscow, on St. Petersburg, anywhere, Krasnodar Krai, on that camp. And then we try to find relatives. If not, sometimes it's orphans. We try to connect with kids. But if it's children older than 12, because for younger kids it's very hard. They have no social media.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have no cell phones, and that's why it's very hard to find and return younger kids. But for older kids, we communicate with them. We planning their escape. If we can find relatives, we can send them there and help them in Russia or Belarus, and then to plan the route. I can't tell you a lot because a lot of confidential.
It's sensitive information, I understand.
Because Russia are trying to block any rescue of these kids, and especially each story under the control of Maria Lvova-Belova, who received warrant order, if you know.
She rejoices in the ridiculous title of Commissioner for Children's Rights.
I've been Commissioner of Children's Rights with two presidents of Ukraine.
She's kind of like the child catcher in chief, really, of the Russian regime.
And you know, it's former commissioner. It's like slaves of Putin, and former was a KGB guy. And when I was appointed on that position, 2014, first who called to me was Putin's commissioner for children's rights.
Really?
And after invasion. But that time, if you remember, Russia told that, it's not our war.
Yes.
We don't know. It's your civilian war. We are not there. And he called to me and so, congratulations. Let's collaborate. We are friends. It's Russian narratives. I asked, what do you want from me? I want collaborate. Our hospitals is very open for Ukrainian children. You can send your kids and we will heal them. Get out from our land, I told him. It's not we. It's your conflict.
Yes.
Let's be friends. Yeah, you know, it's horrible.
Yeah, well, it is. But I guess, you know, they have swallowed the Kool-Aid. Some of the we forget sometimes that there are members of the Russian regime who believe everything they're doing is the right thing to do, even though any evidence that we can see from the outside would demolish that thought in a moment. Finally, Michael, there must be a lot of work to do with the children when they get back to you.
Yes.
That your job is not over when they are home.
Yeah, thank you for asking me, because it's not it is important not only find a child, but to return. It's a huge problem. But after returning, we have a suite of services for these kids, hope and healing centers and 6 months recovery program. And we have centers after reunification with their families. Children can live one of our 7 hope and healing center. But we have a special for orphans, because we are returning orphans from occupied territories and from Russia, and they can live there and to be recovered. And together with our government, we provide placement to Ukrainian foster families. As you've seen yesterday, Ksenia, her 11 years old brother, been placed to a foster family, and he cared and loved there. And Ksenia in university now, she lives in our center, and we care for her. And she's the voice of all orphans now. She want to be a journalist, and she want do everything in her life just to raise her voice for all orphans who've been kidnapped by Russia.
And this is your reward, I think, personally, to see people like her making a difference for future generations.
Yeah, it is very important. These kids so hugely traumatized, and now it's so important to deprogramming them first and recover and to heal their traumas, because many of them lost their hope being there, because Russians all time told them, you will never come back, we will invade all Ukraine, your parents no need you, your country no need you, and they've been threatened by Russians. And you can imagine how they angry on them.
Of course.
But it's very important for us to heal their hearts.
I love the fact that your centres are called the Hope and Healing Centres. That's beautiful. Thank you. And now you're off to The Hague, I think. I mean, your work is both on the ground, as it were, and at political level, a policy level as well.
Yeah, it is important to prove that Russia, it's to prove Russian genocidal plans, because what they're doing is a pure evil. It is genocide of Ukrainian children, because all, you know what, we think that genocide is just death camps or famine, which what happened before when massively children were killed. But now genocide, face of genocide is different. It's enough to deport these children, to forcibly transfer them, re-educate them, instill hatred and weaponize. It is different style of genocide.
But it still eradicates the genus. The tribe, the Ukrainian tribe is eradicated because the children have been persuaded.
Ukrainian children.
Yes.
It's because many of them not Ukrainian anymore. It is Russian children. That's why many people cannot understand this. And in United Nations and in different countries, I had a statement and asked, please define what is this? If not genocide, what is this? Tell me.
Yes. And that is why I think, thanks partly to your work, that that Putin and Lvova Belova, the Commissioner for Children's Rights, have been targeted by an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court, because it is indeed, albeit a new definition or a different definition of genocide, it remains genocide nonetheless. I thank you. Thank you for coming in today. And congratulations on last night. It was a remarkable evening, wasn't it? It was incredible to have all of those people assembled in one space.
Yeah, it is recognition of what we are doing, not only me, but my organization, all staff, all volunteers, everybody who saving lives of abducted children.
Mykola Kuleba, the Chief Executive and founder of Save Ukraine, and now the Magnitsky Award winner for outstanding human rights activism. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's 19 minutes after 12. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It is 22 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien. I'm going to try something a bit different now, if I can. I'm going to be really specific on who I want to call me, okay? So we're staying with the story about the benefits crackdown in a way, but we're asking a question spawned really by the caliber and the emotional heft of the callers that we've already had. So my apologies to everybody waiting to contribute to that conversation, to add your stories to the ones that we've already heard. We will return to this, and I will always have your back, okay? I hate these stories. I hate it. I read the columns and hear the comments that Natasha referred to when I do hear them. The idea that it is so easy to demonize the needy or the vulnerable. And that's what I want to talk about next. So there are two questions, really. And the Holy Grail caller will be the one in a position to answer both. Okay, but I'm more than happy if we don't find the Holy Grail caller with callers who can only answer the first question. And the first question is this. We've just spent 10 minutes in the company of somebody who has dedicated his life to helping people less fortunate than himself. You know? And it is not extraordinary to encounter people who do that. Mykola does it in extraordinary circumstances. Everybody else who picked up an award last night at the Methodist Central Hall in Westminster does take that to an extraordinary level. But one of the things that I always take away from that ceremony is the question, actually, of what would you do? What would you do if the spotlight fell on you? You know, you met Karine Kanimba earlier this week, who, along with her sister Anais, also picked up an award last night for outstanding young person in the same field in human rights advocacy. And her father, her adoptive father, Paul Rusesabagina, who was also there last night, he is the hero of Hotel Rwanda, the Don Cheadle film that you may or may not have seen, but a kind of Schindler. figure during the Rwandan genocide, and he was a hotel manager. Cometh the hour, cometh the man. I mean, absolutely no compunction upon him to do that. So you always come away from events like that and meetings with people like Paul and like Michael, thinking, what would I be the person I would want to be if I ever found myself in those circumstances? Would I be that person? If the planet span, if the dice rolled and you found yourself facing that kind of dilemma, would you be the person, would you be the hero that you would hope that you might be? And the tragic truth is, for most of us, that we wouldn't. We wouldn't necessarily sign up with the bad guys or go in the opposite direction, but we would probably, most of us, keep our head down. And you can hope, and I do hope, that I wouldn't be one of the people to keep my head down, but until that moment happens, until you're there managing a hotel in Kigali when people are fleeing genocide and you have a window in which you can help at great and enormous and permanent risk to your own safety and survival, you can choose to help, shelter, and get them out. It's crazy, right? I always find myself thinking about that when I'm hosting that ceremony. It's an incredible evening, an incredible ceremony. And I mentioned that in passing. As a quick word on the Rwandan issue, because I had a bit of almost a surreal moment on stage when Karine and her sister were describing the regime of Paul Kagame, the current dictator in Rwanda. And there were Tory MPs in the room, right? Ian Duncan Smith was there, and to his credit, he spoke up incredibly powerfully and very critical of the Conservative government. Here's something you've never heard before on this programme. Me giving some credit to Ian Duncan Smith, but he spoke up powerfully and persuasively about the case of Jimmy Lai, who we've also talked about on this programme. Jimmy is a British citizen currently being held by the authorities in Hong Kong for the crime of publishing a newspaper, for the crime of journalism. And Duncan Smith spoke up very powerfully about the failure of the Foreign Office and the UK government to do their duty by Jimmy Lai. But, last time I checked, he was also a supporter of the Rwandan policy. So you're sitting there presiding over the bestowing of an award upon two extraordinary young women who tirelessly agitated for their own father's release from a dictator's jail. Just 3 years ago. I also sat next to the American negotiator, an extraordinary man, truly an extraordinary man, who had essentially helped them and had achieved that end. A chap called Roger Carstens, who is the special presidential envoy for hostage affairs. He goes to a mad evening, you can tell. But I'm standing on the stage listening to Karine and Anais talking about the difficulties that they had and the help they received from Roger in getting their dad out of a dictator's jail, where he had been tortured and where he had ended up after being kidnapped, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, this is the same regime that Rishi Sunak and his colleagues, to whom Rishi Sunak and his colleagues remain determined to deliver refugees and asylum seekers from this country with no hope of return. I'm sorry, I didn't know I was going to go off on this particular tangent, but I have to. That's what I did last night. I listened to the daughters, two survivors of the Rwandan genocide, and the daughters of the hotel manager who saved over 1,000 souls from genocide, recounting how he had ended up being kidnapped, imprisoned, and tortured by the same regime to which Rishi Sunak remains determined to send asylum seekers and refugees in this country with no hope of return. And I couldn't quite get my head around it, to be honest with you. And I still can't. I still can't. And now hopefully nor can you either, because it's a lonely old business sometimes doing this for a living. How can that be? How can I be there honouring enemies of a dictatorial, torturous regime while living in a country whose current government wants to send some of the most vulnerable people on the planet there to the same place, ruled by the same man, with absolutely no hope whatsoever of return? It's a funny old world. So anyway, after 12:30, I want to talk about the opposite type of person. Not the kind of person who wonders whether, when push comes to shove, they would have the stones or the wherewithal to be the hero that they'd like to be, but instead the kind of person who listens to these invitations to attack the demonised and takes them up with alacrity. And I'm not here really to attack you, but I am here to ask you why you think it works. Why is it? Why do they know at the Times and at Downing Street that the words benefits crackdown or the words look for a job or lose your medicine? Why do they know that with a certain type of voter that will go down like a delicious cup of tea? Why does it work? Why do these appeals to the very worst of us work so well? And I want your answers to that question. And if you used to be like that but you're not anymore, I would really love to know what happened. So you would once have sat here listening to invitations on the radio to hate unemployed people. You'd have swallowed all the stuff about flat screen TVs and lives of leisure, living it up and loving it. You'd have bought it all. And now you know the truth. I want you to tell me how you ended up being in the first position and what brought you to the second position. So here are the two questions. Why does this vile rhetoric work so well? 0345 6060 973. And what helped you see the light? 0345 6060 973. It's 12:32 and Amelia Cox has your headlines. It is 12:36. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We're having essentially established that it's highly unlikely the look for a job or lose your medicine headlines will be translated into substantive policy. We're left wondering why they do it. But we can answer that question. They do it because it will rile up a certain type of listener or viewer or voter. But why does it work so well? And this is probably me speaking from... Well, I would normally say this is probably me speaking from a position of privilege, but I'm nowhere near as privileged as Rishi Sunak or Jeremy Hunt when it comes to my own personal financial situation. So they're making a calculation here about people who presumably aren't like them. I can't imagine Rishi Sunak with whatever it is, 700 million quid in the bank, in the joint account, lies in bed at night fretting about unemployed people living on 80 quid a week getting too much free medicine. Well, maybe he does. I don't know. Maybe he does. But I don't understand why it works so well. Okay? And I want you to tell me. And I really want you to tell me if you have crossed to the other side. You've gone from thinking, this is good, this is important, we need more benefits crackdowns. The last 27 haven't worked. Or... you now sort of think, God, I can't quite believe I used to think like that. And let's try and work out why you did. Alan is in Blackpool, which is a very poor part of the country, Alan, you won't mind me mentioning. What would you like to say?
Yeah, good afternoon, Jim. I will say, actually, and I'll give you my brief story and explain exactly why my views changed. I'm originally from Chingford in London, which of course is probably, in that sense, the opposite. It's my history. I'll tell you like it was. Can you believe, for 21 years was a postman in Chingford, where I was brought up, where I lived.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I had a regular delivery, and there were quite a few people, there were quite a few people...
We're going to have to do something about the phone line, Alan. I don't know if I really, really want to hear this story. I don't know what gift you have, but you've set it up in a way that has got me absolutely... on the edge of my seat, but just breaking down a bit the phone line there. So I will just try and improve that, and I'll come back to you imminently. 12:38 is the time. A couple of you pointing out down at the front of the queue that I don't think any of this was in the King's speech. I don't think the inheritance tax stuff was either. But I thought that while we try and improve the quality of Alan's line, we've heard a lot about struggling today, haven't we? We've heard a lot about very difficult journeys. So I thought that you might find this quite inspirational and uplifting.
My lords, it is a tremendous privilege to make my maiden speech in your lordship's house. It has been quite the journey getting to this moment.
That is Charlotte Owens, who 6 years ago was an intern in Boris Johnson's office and is now in the House of Lords. We may catch up with a little bit more of her maiden speech, but there you go, quite the journey, eh? Whew, from intern to the House of Lords in the kind of time it takes most of us to get A-levels. Back to Alan. So, you were in Chingford working as a postman.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I was saying that I was on a regular walk, well, not the same walk all the time, but for a lot of the 21 years. Anyway, the point being, there were quite a few people who were unemployed on my walk.
Yes.
And, all right, I put, in those days rather, I put the what do you call it, the payments, not in cash, but the payments through the door every other week. Gyros, thank you, sorry.
There we go.
Anyway, the point being as well that from time to time, and quite a few different people would get bills from Sky Television or such like. And I used to think to myself, these people, they do nothing. Here's me walking the streets, working with... I enjoyed what I did, don't get me wrong, but, working hard, blah, blah, blah. And I quite honestly, I thought it's about time they sorted some of these people out and got them to work. Why should I be, subsidising
I do know. It makes,
people?
what you say makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So what changed? Well, we won't go into all the history, but after all those years it became Royal Mail, the paper was Royal Mail. Anyway, I left. They were getting rid of people. I got nice money to get out. Yeah. Anyway, the point being that I eventually landed up as a receptionist for Westminster Social Services in London.
Crikey, that's a turnaround.
It is, and that's when I realised what life was about. That's when I met people who were in need, people who didn't have places to go, people who were, with children, with families, or at their wits' end, coming in. I don't like to say that I just bless them, and I should be careful what I say, but begging for our help. Yeah. And of course, that's what the social services were there for. Without blowing my own trumpet.
Well, if you do, you're in good. If you do blow your own trumpet, Alan, you're in very good company. So don't worry unduly about that.
I think all I was going to say was that people would come in. Obviously, myself and my colleague were the receptionist, but people obviously would have to wait to see someone. So often they would talk to myself and my colleague because we were the first point of contact, and they needed to talk to someone. And I'll tell you what, I learned what life was about during that time. My views totally changed, and I'm ashamed of the way I used to think. I realised what life was about. I met people in need. I met some lovely people, but they were in trouble. Let's be honest with you.
And through no fault of their own.
No, many people weren't. No, that's it, exactly. I mean, who knows what life's going to throw at us? What? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So that is my honest story.
Well, I mean, in a way, I don't know that you've got anything to be ashamed of, because if you're delivering unemployment benefit and Sky TV bills to a house, I can completely understand why you would think that is unacceptable. But I suppose the question underpinning that would be, what are they going without? It depends how much the cheque is for, really, and how much what are they going without in order to pay for Sky TV? These people could be living in ridiculously unpleasant circumstances, but they've just chosen to spend their money on distractions all day.
Yeah, that's true. And I never gave that a thought, James. Let's be honest with you. I never gave that a thought.
I don't think I would have done. And how did you end up in Blackpool? Just given that we're doing the life story, Alan, I thought we'd better get the final chapters in.
Oh dear, this is a bit of a turnaround, isn't it? Can you believe, having told you all that, I'm not blaming anyone else for this, I got into some trouble and I landed up homeless.
Oh, no.
But people have been very kind to me. We'll cut a long story short. I was up here in Blackpool. I suppose I've got family history up here. Yeah. So I landed up here, and a charity up here, a very lovely lady saw me sort of sleeping rough, took a shine to me in the nicest way, and got me a place up here where I've been for 2 years.
Well,
and I couldn't be happier or better looked after. So I can say to you that I really have seen life the full circle.
You have? I had no idea that was going to be the.
Well, no, I didn't want to say that unless you asked me. I mean, but yeah, that's the honest truth, James. Yeah.
Well, the Blackpool years.
But I will say it was my fault. I would blame no one
all
else.
right.
I just did some silly thing.
I understand. You lost what you had, and you needed help getting back on your feet, and you found it. And it didn't, by the sounds of it, didn't really come from the government. Alan, what a remarkable story. Thank you for sharing it. It's coming up to 1:45. It is. I mean, that is it. I mean, you didn't even need to be on the post round. If I say, look, there's an unemployed fella over there. He's got Sky TV, and you automatically presume that he is living a life of Riley. I mean, what if he's living on pot noodles and he's got Sky TV, cheap noodles, instant noodles, or cup of soups, and he's got Sky TV? Are you still cross? Are you still jealous? Living with depression, but he's got Sky TV. Other television subscription services are available. But I see how it works. You see how it works. And that, I guess, is why the flat screen telly, you couldn't turn your radio on at one point 10, 15 years ago without someone wanging on about flat screen televisions. And these people, if they're in my line of work, they know that they're not telling the truth. They know that the massive majority of people on unemployment benefits are not spending their lives hoovering up foie gras and caviar while watching their 240-inch television. They know all that. But they also know it works. It's a brand of, you can't really call it journalism, it's a brand of propagandizing that enables right-wing people who enjoy enormous unfair advantage to persuade ordinary people who don't enjoy enormous unfair advantage that the problems in their life are caused by people with less than them rather than the people dishing out the contracts. And remember, you're talking also about regulation in a lot of this stuff. Send people back to work, particularly if they've got illnesses and disabilities, then you're going to need a lot of regulation in place to make sure that they're safe. And what does Jacob Rees-Mogg dedicate his life to these days? Trying to get rid of regulations. Some days the jigsaw pieces almost put themselves together, don't they? 12:49 is the time. I do think that's helpful, actually, as we reflect upon how hard life can be for the people that the government is currently targeting with another benefits crackdown. I think it's helpful to share inspirational stories of hard work being rewarded with great success. So here is, I'll just play that clip again, of a young lady called Charlotte Owen, giving her maiden speech in the House of Lords after, an incredibly difficult time of it, working initially just 6 long years ago as an intern in Boris Johnson's office.
My lords, it is a tremendous privilege to make my maiden speech in your lordship's house. It has been quite the journey getting to this moment.
I think we should find. I'd like to know a little bit more about her, because you can say one thing about this country: it don't let anybody tell you that it's not a meritocracy. All right, don't let anybody tell you that it's who you know, not what you know, that gets you ahead. And listen to this: if this doesn't qualify you to be the youngest member of the House of Lords, then frankly, I don't know what does.
My lords, I was born in 1993. George Michael was still at number 1. And the Spice Girls were about to set in motion a wave of girl power. I'm a child of the dial-up internet connection, when mobile phones were only for phone calls, and the World Wide Web was about to be launched to the public.
Do you know, I've allowed this one to wash over me, really, and I appreciate there's a lot of speculation about what reasons might lie behind her ennobling, but I think that they are mostly rubbish, by the way. Do you know why Boris Johnson made her a lady, or whatever it's called, a baroness? Because he can. This is another example of pooing in the kettle on the way out of Downing Street. What was the first example we came up with earlier in the week? Was it? We had a good example. We said it was like pooing in the kettle, like a burglar who poos in the kettle on the way out of your house. That's what Boris Johnson was doing at Downing Street. He was just putting people, doing things solely because he could, It's almost like a Roman emperor making his horse a senator, which I think might be an apocryphal story, but it's still a very good one. So Boris Johnson makes an obviously unworthy and entirely unsuitable candidate. I'm sure she's a lovely person, but she's got no more business being in the House of Lords than any of the hereditary peers have, I suppose. But she was winning them over with her tales of George Michael and the Spice Girls. Should we have a little bit more? I think, but anyway, sorry, I've got distracted from the central point of this, which is to offer up hope to everybody who's struggling at the moment that just with the right help and support, you too could be in the House of Lords by the time you're 30.
I must also thank the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who put a great deal of trust in me, and I will be forever grateful, not only for this, but for his kindness and encouragement. I feel immensely privileged to have worked with him and other cabinet ministers during my time at Number 10. I was delighted that his commitment to delivering the referendum result, his optimism, his vision for levelling up the country and for ensuring that life chances are fairly distributed resulted in the seismic election victory of 2019.
I think we can all agree with the 30-year-old member of the House of Lords put there by Boris Johnson, for whom she was working as an intern 6 years ago, that life chances in this country are fairly distributed, can't we? I mean, if she represents anything, it is the fact that life chances in this country are fairly distributed. You show me a 24-year-old from a humble background who hasn't got a realistic chance of being in the House of Lords by the time that they're 30, and I will show you, well, I probably shouldn't show you that. But my God, and I don't hold any particular ill will towards her, although I think saying, oh yes, I'll definitely accept that peerage would involve a degree of chutzpah that most of us can only dream of. But to stand in the House of Lords, to be so supremely unself-aware, praising Boris Johnson, you can forgive and hopefully forget. You know what happened during COVID, so does she. You know how contemptuous he was of Parliament, so does she. You know how much danger he inflicted unnecessarily on the country, so does she. But hey-ho, on we go. But to stand there at the age of 30 and talk about the distribution of life chances, the fair distribution of life chances. Quite extraordinary. But there we go. You show me a 24-year-old that hasn't got a realistic chance of being in the House of Lords by the time they're 30, and I will show you proof that she's right when she talks about the fair distribution of life chances. We talk quite a lot about class on Full Disclosure this week because my guest Miles Jupp is, like me, a beneficiary of a wonderful education, but unlike Charlotte Owens perhaps, completely unaware of no, we're completely aware of how lucky that makes us. And you probably know him from Rev or from the News Quiz on Radio 4. Some of you may know him as Archie the Inventor on Balamory. You may know him from The Thick of It. You may know him from his stand-up, or you may know him from various other. Charlotte Owens probably knows him from being Archie the Inventor on Balamory. We'd have to just double-check the timelines, wouldn't we? She could have added that. I am from the dial-up internet generation, the Archie the Inventor on Balamory cohort of young Brits. And I'd like to thank Boris Johnson for distributing life chances. So anyway, enough of that. Here's me and Miles Jupp chewing the fat in this week's Full Disclosure.
We did a show called Live Floor Show on BBC Scotland. It was a sort of gang show, about 5 of us, And I did that, and I would have been in third year at university then. And it was a 4-year degree. And then while I was doing that, I think, and we did one series of that, so like 8 episodes. And then someone I bumped into on the train said, my husband, someone I knew, she was a stand-up poet. My husband's producing a kids show and was wondering if you'd audition. And I was like, okay, and I knew him, and I was like, fine. And I thought, this must be how it works.
Yeah.
You do one thing and then another thing comes along. And so I auditioned for that. So that was Balamory. And then I suppose I was saying, these things don't happen by accident, but that maybe you're like, well, I wonder what this will be like. And I did have an agent by then. I'd won a newcomer competition called So You Think You're Funny in 2001. The
Leicester Mercury.
I also won the Leicester Mercury Comedian the same year. Yeah. When I won the Leicester Mercury Comedian of the Year, James, I had only gigged in Scotland, maybe one gig in Newcastle, and I'd not been gigging that long. It was only open to people who'd been going less than a year. And my whole act about sort of being the sort of posh English person had been developed entirely for a Scottish audience.
Okay.
And so I got the train down to Leicester, and I thought, I wonder if this is funny here.
Gosh.
I hadn't really thought about going beyond the sort of confines I was in. As you know, as we made our way down the East Coast main line, I thought, I assume I'm getting less and less funny with each passing.
With every station.
Yeah. And someone would get on at Newcastle, and I'd say something, it wouldn't be that funny, and I was like, they like that in Berwick. What's going on here? And by the time you get to Peterborough, you're really unfunny. And now you're sort of just turning straight off to Leicester, and it's all. But so we did that TV show, and then I got the Balamory thing. But I was still at university, and I remember going to my director of studies and saying, I've been offered a part in this thing, but it's 22 weeks of filming, and it will clash with whatever, like the first set of finals and stuff like that. And this is how institutionalized I was. I said to him, and he said, so what's the, that sounds great. I said to him, am I allowed to do it? And he said, well, yeah, you can do...
You'd be 22 about this point, would you?
Yeah. I said, I'm a grown-up, but only, And he said, of course, you can do whatever you like. Yeah, this sounds like a really good opportunity. Yeah. Whereas I didn't think that's how it...
Well, there's a duality as well, perhaps. There is the sort of the world you wanted to be in and the world you were in, and now they are sort of clashing, aren't they, for the first time?
I guess. And he was going, that sounds really fun. I mean, just go do it. Yeah, great. So I was like, it turns out, whereas I thought I was having to go and sort of persuade him.
Yes.
My agent had gone, just do it, because it's, and I mean, by that age, some people would have been through drama school or whatever. And he said, this would be your kind of training, if you like. And I didn't really think, and all the other thing he said was, look, it's a very new channel, CBeebies. Not many people watch it. It's just no one will see it. Probably just go and do it and enjoy it. So I went off and then it became obviously of its type and time a sort of big.
It was huge
program. So that was the sort huge. Of that's the bit when you think, gosh, this isn't something that I'm in control of really.
I forgot to tell my kids about that. They'll be really excited, and so should you be. Miles Jupp there on this week's Full Disclosure. A really lovely conversation with a very lovely man. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back to the whole show podcast on Global Player, where you can also rewind and pause live radio. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as all the world's biggest podcasts, up to and including Full Disclosure. Pause and rewind live radio on Global Player, where you're always in control. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it is Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 Now it's time